States. Read your Constitution. He has no ability to do anything on the Supreme Court of the United States. Congress has power to limit or increase the number of justices on the court. That's the only power they have when it comes to the Supreme Court. Of course, they create the lower courts and have a lot more power with regard to them. But a presidential commission on the Supreme Court, this was an intimidation tactic. And it was done through an executive order 14023. They issued the report in December 2021, almost 300 pages, endless number of advisors, endless number of topics. They're investigating the Supreme Court of the United States to intimidate it, And that's all they do. And Justice Jackson never opened her mouth as a lower federal court judge or as a Supreme Court justice. Neither did all the clapping seals judges who were applauding her a few days back. CNN, Biden calls for major Supreme Court reforms, including term limits and so forth. July 29, 2024, he called for major Supreme Court reforms, including, in addition to term limit, binding code of conduct for the High Court. It's a separation of powers, by the way. Politico, June 2024. The president appeared at a star-studded fundraiser in Los Angeles that raised record sums, about $30 million, and Biden rips into the Supreme Court, calls appointments one of the scariest part of the second Trump term. And it's more than that. Here we have Biden says Supreme Court is out of control, orders HHS to protect abortion rights. It's out of control. July 8, 2022. Biden issues Supreme Court warning. Biden urged to take a blowtorch to the Supreme Court after the Roe ruling, that is 2022. It's not just related to Roe, you've got it related to student loans, you've got it related to immigration. Political, Biden rips into the Supreme Court. What else? Newsweek, Biden steps up attack on the Supreme Court. Biden's dangerous Supreme Court criticism unprecedented, experts say. More, BBC, Biden criticizes extreme Supreme Court and push for reform. You know, President Trump has never done any of this. He defends the presidency, the Constitution, separation of powers, and we the people and our votes, our franchise, against out-of-control judges. It's a completely different argument that Trump's making. Trump is making a fundamental argument about the construct of our government and the Constitution. Jackson and her leftist buddies and Biden and the Democrats are attacking the independence of the judicial system. Schumer just admits we put 225 progressives, aka radical leftists, on the court to thwart Trump in case he got elected. There's a completely different approach. One is evil, theirs. One is good, Trump's. Trump's not seeking to pack a court. He hasn't done any of that. But let's go on. NBC News 2024. Senate Democrats blast Supreme Court's ethical crisis as investigations conclude. A lengthy investigation by Senate Democrats into alleged ethical lapses by Supreme Court justices has ended the release of a report. Of course, they kept Sotomayor out of it, and she's the most unethical of all the justices. Democrats bemoan the fact that Chief Justice Roberts declined to speak to the Judiciary Committee, which is chaired by Senator Richard Durbin, a hack who's retiring. But the Chief Justice shouldn't lower himself to get involved in the politics of Congress. He also called for Congress to pass a law to put in place a more rigorous code. Congress can't put a more rigorous code in place. It's the Supreme Court of the United States. That is, it's an independent judicial system. So while they pretend to support an independent judicial system, what they really mean is we're going to attack these conservative justices. We're going to attack the independence of the court. We're not just going to attack their rulings. We want to completely change it. Why? Because Woodrow Wilson, the first of the early progressives, said our power comes through the courts, our judges, the unelected elements of the government. We must create this massive administrative state. Who's taking on the administrative state? Trump, Musk, the administration, who you elected to do exactly that. And all these lawsuits are intended to thwart them, to stop them from cutting spending, from cutting the workforce, from reducing the size of government, from eliminating programs. They're trying to freeze them in place to serve the interests of the Democrat Party. That's their power base, not we the people. government. And they had their judges in place. Woodrow Wilson told them, put your judges in place. FDR, when he came to the Supreme Court and pushing through his New Deal, well, a lot of the justices said, that's socialism, that's not supported by the Constitution. So he sought to crush the Supreme Court, destroy its independence, the first president of the United States to seek to pack the court. It was so bad that the Democrats then said no. Today, the Democrats say yes, because they've changed 100%. They're now of the American Marxist one-party rule ideology. Trump is fighting it. Trump's standing up to it. We literally have a Supreme Court justice that comes off her cloud and speaks to a group and makes a public political speech she knows the media will love, because the media hate us too. Trashing the effort of the President of the United States, who is under attack by these progressive judges. The truth is, if we had a functioning judiciary, she would be forced to resign. That's how bad what she said is. That's how out of control and out of line her comments were. You have something to say, you save it for your opinions. And I can't wait to read your opinion in which you explain to the American people how their vote doesn't matter, how the president has to beg and look over his shoulder to make for 225 progressive judges agree with what he has to say. Justice, I can't wait for your opinion to show us where that is in the Constitution. It's nowhere in the Constitution. You're defending a post-constitutional, all-powerful judiciary. That's despotism. Here's another one, Fox News. Democrats attack conservative Supreme Court justices, but have long ignored liberal justices' ethical issues. Here we have Politico. Dems revive calls for Clarence Thomas's resignation. Right. Well, I'll start my call for Jackson's resignation. What do we have here? Democrats attack Clarence Thomas's wife, which they constantly do, Ginny Thomas, in a bid for his recusal from the Trump case. Newsweek, 40 years, as I said, of attacks and slurs against Thomas. 40 years against a black justice, a conservative, a constitutionalist, a patriot. Newsweek, what the disgusting racism against Justice Thomas reveals about the anti-racist side, so-called, an opinion piece. Now they hate Alito. See, because he was the author of the Dobbs decision. I'm going to get Alito. Get him. What do we do? Smear the hell out of him. They held Justice Alito infuriates Democrats with upside-down flag. It's alarming. It's appalling. The same Democrats who defend the Nazis in our street, the same Democrats who defend the wife beater, the same Democrats that defend Hamas and tell us it's free speech. So his wife puts a flag up, flying upside down, and it's a national scandal. Sick. Sick.
What if there was a way to know if a stock will be bullish or bearish the day before? The truth is, there actually is one way. Is your trading account suffering right now, but you're wondering, what do I do to start winning consistently and start making those big returns you've seen other traders make, the returns that you know are possible? Here's the...
Sick. 48 House Democrats, Huffington Post, call on Samuel Alito to recuse himself from the January 6 cases because his wife flew a flag that a lot of people fly, but they were carrying it around. He's got to recuse himself. That wife of his, what is she doing with that flag? Networks rally to run new Alito conspiracy theory up the flagpole. Newsbusters, because they all are one and the same. Now let's talk about attacks on the court. I just laid out for you in about 15 minutes time, and I could have done it all day long, on how the Democrats attack this court, on how Biden attacks the court, but they don't just attack the opinions. They're trying to destroy the independence of the court and the construct of the court and the construct of separation of powers. They want an all-powerful judiciary as long as they control it, as long as they pack it. And if you don't go along, they seek to destroy you. Clarence Thomas, Alito, other judges, and other judicial nominees. FDR tried to pack the court, not through changes by amendment to the Constitution or anything of the sort. He just wanted to pack the court to get his way. Tyrant. That was tyranny. What else has been going on with the court? How about Harry Reid and Barack Obama? Harry Reid and Barack Obama conspired to add 3 more judges on the second most powerful court. Do you remember this? The D.C. Circuit Court. That court was divided 4-4 with 6 senior status judges. Most of them were Republican. So Obama wasn't getting the rulings he wanted. So what did he do? They added 3 more judges to that court. And it didn't deserve those judges based on their workload. But Obama wanted to control the court. And so the Democrats to this day control the D.C. Court of Appeals, the appellate court, because Obama and Reid put 3 Obama leftists on that court where they sit today. What else did Harry Reid do? Harry Reid removed the filibuster from the nominations of lower court judges. The nuclear option, they called it. Never been done before. Now, Mitch McConnell returned the favor when he came to the Supreme Court, and that's won in his favor. But it was the Democrats who decided we're going to change all the rules. We want to pack the courts. If we have to increase the numbers of judges, we'll increase the number of judges. But we've got to get our ideologues on the court. And so that's what they did. Since Majority Leader Harry Reid changed Senate rules to ease the approval of most of President Barack Obama's nominees, Democrats have churned through confirmations of dozens of new judges, Politico, giving them lifetime appointments that will extend the administration's influence for years to come. They don't believe in elections. Power, one-party power, like Justice Jackson. Is Obama trying to pack the court? This is in the Hill. Yeah, and they did. They packed the D.C. Circuit Court. Justice Jackson thinks this is all great, but she never said a damn thing. But when Donald Trump is trying to defend the office of the presidency, separation of powers, the Constitution, from what Chuck Schumer and Obama and Biden did to the judiciary, he's the one we have to fear. This is a battle between we the people and the ruling class. I've said it over and over again. Donald Trump must win this fight, and we must be heard.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell, and I had some issues with the previous live stream, so I had to shut it down and then restart everything. Thank you for joining. We're doing a live stream on Rumble, YouTube, and also on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I have not set up the X spaces yet, but I will be doing that. It's May 5th. We're doing the live stream about the market, and I will republish this video stream on all my channels. I have 4 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Hold on. I have 4 channels on YouTube, and then I also have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please subscribe to all those channels. In addition, please help support my work by donating. You can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel. I put all these videos out for free. I don't put anything behind a paywall. It's the people that donate that help support my work, and the people that buy the products on my store that help to perpetuate the show. I tell you how to navigate the financial markets, give you my opinion about international news and domestic news, and also how to improve your health and wellness. So please go to my store and help support my work so I can provide you these videos for free. With that said, please ask your social media to follow me so I can accrete more followers, so I can reach a larger audience to help with their health and wellness. With that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps that I have. I have lemongrass, charcoal tea tree, and lavender and peppermint. Very high quality soaps that I use. It's made from structural nano silver. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, and you get $5 off. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. So please help support my work by going to the store and getting the great products that I offer. Let's continue on with the update on the market. So the S&P 500 is trading at 5,662. The VIX is trading at 23.3531. The Euro USD is trading at 1.13. Oil is trading at 56.83. BITO is trading at 19.86, and the USD Japanese yen is trading at 143.77. We want the Japanese yen to be in about the 148 range. If it goes below 140, that's a sign of stress in the international market. We want VIX to be below 20. Right now, it's at 23. Oil, there's a story with oil that I want to talk about. I did mention it earlier, but that broadcast had to be shut down. So to reset everything. So pre-COVID era for the oil, its trading range was in the mid 50s. All right. And then when the crisis happened in 2020, oil dropped a lot. So when you take the long fib sequence between the drop in oil from 2020 to the high of oil, all right, in recent time, since the last 5 years, that's the large fib sequence for oil. Now, it happens to be that the sell-off in oil is at the 61% retracement right now for that long fib sequence. And that happens to be in line with pre-COVID oil price. Now, pre-COVID oil price is adjusted because of the oil shale production. So you have this range of about 51 to about 55, somewhere in there, 52 to 55, right? So mid 50s. Now, the fundamentals are around $61 a barrel. You have certain producers that have to cap their wells because they're not profitable. There's a little bit more granularity when you look at the financial stability of certain wells in certain companies. So if oil goes below 60, you have some people dropping out and capping wells, capping their production. And there's another tier that start to drop out at about 55, and another set drop in when oil goes below 50. All right. So that's the fundamentals. The behavioral is that you had a trading range of about in the mid 50s pre-COVID, but that was adjusted because of all the oil that came on because of production with oil shale. Now, what's happening recently is that OPEC plus, there's 3 nations. I think it's Iraq, Uzbekistan, and I don't remember the last one. It could be Venezuela. But there's 3 nations that aren't following their quotas. They're producing more than what OPEC plus agreed upon. To offset that overproduction that's taking place, all right, several months ago, the Saudis have been reducing oil production. The Saudis are upset because they're losing market share. So what they decided to do is that they're going to start producing more barrels of oil per day. And that's going to drive the price down and force certain producers in OPEC to readjust their production and go back to the targets that they originally set. So the Saudis are shocking the system for Brent crude. That means that it's going to affect WTI. So the question is how low does this get? It's probably going to be Brent's probably going to be around 57, right? And that would mean that we may see WTI at around 55, 54 until this adjustment takes place. Now, when the oil is suppressed, then you have many people cutting production. And therefore, if the demand is the same and oil is the cutting of the production in months from now takes place, then you're going to start to see oil price go up. But right now, there's going to be a suppression of oil price because the number of barrels of oil are coming online. Another risk factor is if demand starts to drop because of tariffs globally. We don't know if that's going to happen. So if demand goes down and the oil supply is increased from OPEC plus, you're going to see further decline, which would exacerbate losses for certain energy producers, and therefore they're going to have to stop production. And then months later, you're going to start to see the elevation of the price again. But there's these, and in the immediate term, we don't know if demand is going to drop, and we know for a fact that Saudis are producing more oil. So oil is going to be going down in the short term. Now, if demand goes up, right, then it's going to absorb some of that shock from the Saudis, and then oil will start to appreciate again. The key that I'm making here is that you have to look at it from a fundamental and a behavioral perspective. The fundamental is that OPEC, 3 nations within OPEC plus, were cheating and producing more than they should have. And Saudis are trying to put a lot of oil on the market to drop the price, and that way it will hurt some of these oil producers that are not following the quota. But it also translates into shutting production in the United States for WTI. So you're going to have this price shock going downward, suppression of price for oil, Brent and WTI. But if it goes too far, it's actually going to shut production down, and then oil is going to start to come back up as you burn off that inventory. But it takes time to burn off the inventory. Now, behaviorally, we're at the 61% retracement from the 5-year high and that low that took place during COVID. And it's just in line with pre-2020 crisis oil prices. So I think we're near the bottom. When I say near, in terms of oil, I don't see it moving for WTI below 51 or 52. So, but it could, it could. It depends. If we have a huge demand loss because of the world economy and tariffs, then we may see oil below 50. But it's going to be in this trading range that's very similar to pre-COVID. Is my suspicion here. All right, so just keep that in mind. There is a break even for certain producers. Some people use an aggregate number of $61 a barrel as a break even, but I think it's a little bit more granular. You have producers that can make money at 60, but not that much, and you have other producers that can't. And then you have another tier of producers that will have to drop out after it hits 55, and then another set of producers that have to drop out after 50. So for WTI. So just keep that in mind. Right now it's trading at 56.79, so it's at the high end of the trading range pre-crisis. So this could go as low as maybe 52, but it can't be there for that long because people are going to have to cap. So we'll see what happens, but that's a little bit of a deeper dive on oil. Okay, with that, let's go to Bloomberg here.
We've been sitting here waiting for private equity firms to sell. Their investors want their money back. I talked to the CEO of Oaktree last week. I asked if the chickens are going to come home to roost. Is this the moment where there could be bigger issues? He's saying he saw some secondary funds being sold for 50 cents on the dollar. That's a pretty incredible number. I'm wondering what you're seeing in terms of pain under the surface.
Well, typically we're seeing every LP is looking in this uncertain environment to reweight, and with the market declines and the lack of monetizations, they're finding that they're overweighted to the alt space. So number one is a lot of these institutions find themselves overweight and they want to reweight. The second is what's going on with universities and the like. They're trying to create more liquidity in their endowments and the like and move out of illiquids into liquids. So what we're seeing is a lot of desire and a lot of portfolios coming to market. The reality is when you're selling a portfolio of blue chip private equity sponsors, there are real discounts, but they're nowhere near the discounts you're suggesting.
Well, so are you saying much of this is a potential flood of selling that's going to come from endowments, given the pressure they're under? Is it almost an idiosyncratic thing going on?
I think what's going on is you need a release valve somewhere, and you can't continue to commit and fund monies to the asset class, without getting a return. And if the IPO markets are very difficult to attack, if it's very difficult to find M&A buyers in this market at premium values, the release valve is increasing. The LPs selling portions of their stakes to create liquidity, and GPs trying to do continuation funds to create liquidity.
Now, if I know anything about PJT and you, it's at times of market turnover, tumult, whatever you want to call it, you lean in. Now, when you're talking to a lot of your rivals out there, do you think that this is a market where M&A has slowed down and there might be job cuts? There are going to be people looking to move to places that they're going to capture whatever activity there is. Is it going to get messy out there?
There's always the risk that it gets messy. I think the banks are better capitalized today than they've been in decades. I'm not really worried about systemic issues for the moment. What I do see, though, is with a slowdown in transaction velocity, it's easier for bankers to move from one firm to another. It's most difficult when you have a flood of mandates, and when you go on gardening leave, you're disappointing your client. The friction costs are low right now. We're leaning in. We're trying to take advantage of it. We're going to continue to grow.
We'll keep an eye on that. That is Paul Taubman of PJT Partners. Matt.
All right, that was Shelley Bassett speaking with Paul Taubman of PJT Partners and Chairman and CEO. Really great interview there, wide-ranging and very fascinating to get that view on the markets right on the heels of Milken opening in Los Angeles. In the markets, of course, what I'm paying attention to what's happening in the commodity market, in particular crude. You got WTI down almost 3%. We're now at 56. Brent crude down over 2%. We're now down at 59. Mike McGlone is Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Commodities Analyst, and he joins us now. Mike, obviously the latest downslide was triggered by OPEC Plus pumping over 400,000 barrels of oil a day in June. Second month in a row, could be 3 months. It feels like at least some analysts are calling this the new standard now. What's the downside?
40. Yeah, the rule, if I keep saying the same thing, eventually be right. The key thing is, for now, WTI crude oil, the low for the last couple, this year has been around $55 a barrel, and last night. That was basically the average price in 2019, and that's basically a Bloomberg New Energy Finance says it's about the break-even cost. They said it could go down to 50. It's all it's done is gone back to its break-even cost, and the world's largest producer and now net exporter. Question is, what does it take now to really shut it down? With the whole world tilting towards recession, I think we stick with that pattern since 2008. If every time it got above 100, it eventually did not bottom until around 40. I think that's where it's going most potentially this year. Right now, I don't see what's going to really make it stay above 65.
So what's the feeling out there, Mike? Is Alex and I were talking about this, and she was mentioning the supply issue here, but I'm sure it's also reflecting the fact that maybe demand's not going to be that great. So, I mean, are we seeing this across the commodity space?
Oh, well, exactly. It's the high price cure, Paul. Like, it's significant development in crude oil starting last year when we saw declining demand for diesel in the U.S., Europe, and most notably China. Imports of crude oil from China have been rolling over. It looks just like the U.S. did about 2005. That's when our total imports and our total consumption of crude oil liquid fuel started tilting downwards, and that was just efficiency. Now, 50% of sales of automobile sales in China are EVs.
But the bigger question here, the bigger question with oil is will it go below that trading range pre-COVID? I don't think so. And if you look at that fib sequence, we're at the 61% retracement. That should be a major support level. Now, there's definitely market manipulation, because of the Saudis coming in and increasing oil production, but this is a big story here. Will it break 50 or not? Will it break that trading range pre-COVID or not? based on fib sequences, 61% retracement is a major, I mean, that should be a major support level, right? And it's confirmed by the trading range pre-COVID. Now, obviously, COVID, the whole issue with 2020 was, idiosyncratic, but, in terms of price shock for oil, but there is, it's going to be fascinating how this plays out, but it should be locked into that trading range for a little while pre-2020.
Really bullish have been pointing this out a couple of years ago. They were wrong. Because the key thing to remember is, number one, first of all, that curve. The curve has been in backwardation for a while. It means that further out future has been lower. Why? Because a lot of producers are selling ahead. That's normal backwardation. That's from the past. In the meantime, you can drill now one drill and do, I don't know how many horizontals that go up 4 miles. Rig counts in this country are the same as they were in 2010, yet production's doubled. So it's a new world. And that's the key thing to remember. Rapidly advancing technology is bad for both sides of crude oil. We're replacing the demand side for people like me who drive EVs, and we're adding more and more supply. Not only that, from people like me who live in the Corn Belt, we can get a lot more of our petroleum from biofuels and ethanol. It's just a bad trend. And now that the world's heading towards a recession,
I don't know. I just don't believe that crude oil is going to be at $40 a barrel. I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
Up almost 30% a year, and crude oil down almost 20% a year is a 50% difference. That's only happened a few times in history. The most significant was 2008. Gold was about 6%. Crude oil was down 50%. You see the tilt here? That's the thing I've been writing about for commodities for almost two years now. The tilt from commodities is global recession. And now, with these tariffs, it's got a good reason to accelerate that. So gold got a little expensive, about $3,500 an ounce. I'm really scared it's going to end the year higher, which means significant recession. And key force to make gold go higher is more deflation in the U.S. stock market.
If we don't get a global recession, Mike, what commodity is most dislocated from an economy that's going to hold up all right?
Well, it'd probably be crude oil, because I think to me the nail that might be searching a hammer is copper. Copper's still up about 16% a year, and that's U.S.-based copper. In London, it's almost unchanged. It's down. It's up because of tariff reasons. But you and I know what happens in ours. When you get a major dislocation like that, and global demand might be demanding because of recession, copper is the one I think will get hit if we do get the recession. But what won't, if we don't get a recession, is crude oil would be the one that kind of significantly bounce, because copper's already up. That's the thing. The risk is, to me, this crude oil trend dominoes, tilts towards more deflation, and the hammer keeps hitting next commodities. The next one to hit is copper.
All right, Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We'll get to pork bellies next time, of course. This is Mike McGlone. He covers all the commodities. He's a senior commodity strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's not in the Corn Belt anymore, folks. He's down there in Miami Beach, and he's never coming back. Let's be honest about that. Looking at Bitcoin, it's off 1.9% today. I'll call that out for Tom Kim. I know he's listening. Right around $94,000 per token. The S&P's off 19 points. The Dow up 41. The NASDAQ off 90 here. You're listening to the Bloomberg Intelligence program here today. Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney. We're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. We're streaming live on YouTube as well. For our listeners in the U.S., a reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio on Sirius XM Channel 121, access to the world's only global audio business network, coast to coast, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg Radio on Sirius XM Channel 121 is presented by ShipStation. Stay tuned for the latest market news and industry research. Let's go to John Tucker and get a Bloomberg Business Flash. John.
All right, guys, the major stock averages, they have turned mixed. The data this morning showing a pickup in growth at U.S. service providers, which is the biggest part of the economy. That lifted sentiment a little. Stocks came off the lows of the session. Right now, the S&P 500 down 18 points at 5668. The NASDAQ Composite Index at 89 points lower. That's down about 0.5%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 57 points. That's a rise of about 0.1%. Among the leaders in the Dow, shares of United Healthcare right now up at just about 1.5%. Energy, the biggest drag on the S&P 500, as OPEC Plus agrees to increase oil production. Meantime, Chris Harvey at Wells Fargo is hopeful investors are getting more clarity from the Trump administration.
I think we're past peak uncertainty. And what we do is we look at it this way. He went very hard very early. In order to get that pressure back, I think you'd have to put us into recession. I don't think this administration wants to go into recession because what it would mean.
Was Donald Trump announced 100% tariffs on films made outside the U.S. Shares of companies like Netflix and Walt Disney are lower. Netflix right now down 1.8%. Another movie I'll never see, Thunderbolts.
So good. It was so good.
Oh, of course you saw it. The latest film in Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe of superhero titles, #1 at the box office. $76 million in sales at U.S. and Canadian theater. How much was your ticket? How much was the ticket?
For the three of us, it was 60.
60?
So it's 30 a person. Mm-hmm.
My little theater, the popcorn is more than the tickets.
Oh, well, that's for sure. We have the special truffle salt popcorn.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Because you're Alex.
Exactly.
We set the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and it's your Bloomberg Business Flash, Alex and Paul.
All right, we want it. It's so good. All right, we want to take you back now to Milken Conference. It's kicking off right now as we speak. Treasury Secretary.
All right, let me just plug a bunch of supplements here. Where am I going here? Let's find it. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. It's a great way to build a foundation for your health. Taking a good probiotic is really important. I have it in a veggie cap form or in a powder form. I prefer taking the powder because I take the collagen, the lignans, and the gladiator barley, and the boomer boost. So it's just easier for me to take the powder. But both are very high quality, and it's important to take a good probiotic to get that gut biome proper. You'll be able to absorb your nutrients better. You're going to improve your immune system in your gut. You're going to reduce inflammation in your gut. You're going to improve your skin and your hair and your nails. Your metabolism will improve. The communication between your gut and your liver will improve, and your gut and your brain. You'll most likely be able to sleep better. You'll be less irritable. So please go to my store and get the probiotic, either in the veggie cap form or in the powdered form, and improve your gut biome. That's a very important foundation to build a health protocol. So taking a good probiotic every day is extremely important. Now, I also suggest that you take a multivitamin as part of your foundation. This multivitamin is easy to digest. Many multivitamins out there are not easy to digest, but this one is easy to digest. It has the vitamins that you need as cofactors for enzymatic activity. So your cells will perform better, your metabolism will be better. And by building that as a foundation, especially with the probiotics, you can stack additional things to it, additional to your protocol, based on what you want to target. But taking a multivitamin is extremely important, especially for enzymatic activity and for the health of your mitochondria. And taking a multivitamin is very important, and taking a probiotic is very important. So please start the foundation with the multivitamin and the probiotic, and start building off of it. And we'll be talking about what else you need to do to build off of it. But this is something that I have developed over time. I've been doing this since I was 16 years old, and different supplements have come onto the market. New anti-aging research has come out. And when you tweak it and you take a look at your own biometrics through your blood and through different screenings with your doctor, you can customize and focus on certain systems that you may need targeting. If you have diabetes, you want to focus on that. If you have heart disease, you want to focus on that. If you have cognition issues, you want to focus on that. Or bone density problems, you want to focus on that. Or musculature issues, you want to focus on that. So everyone's different, everyone's biochemistry is different. But if you pay attention and you stack it the way I've been telling you to stack them, you're going to get benefits. So please pay attention. All right. So again, get the multivitamin, get the probiotic, start the foundation, use discount 5, and you get $5 off any order.
Yeah, it says,
but is available in the US, which is a huge market for Netflix. That's what they do.
I spent a few hours and years and decades in the entertainment business, and I have no idea.
It's it's really
Why you need to
confusing.
look at this part of the economy. I have no idea. But it makes for good headlines.
But it is true that Hollywood has been shrinking, right? I mean, there's just less jobs out there, etc. But whether or not that's for AI,
the
whether
golden
that's
age of television
Mhm.
arguably is now. I mean, there's more content being created now for all the streaming services. Everybody's got a job that wants a job. All right, let's head on now
Now we
to
go
Los
on.
Angeles to the Milken Conference. Secretary of Treasury, Mr. Bessent.
Well, I work for President Donald J. Trump, so I feel right at home. Mike Milken, like President Trump, is a visionary. In the 1970s, he had the rare combination of guts and intellect to defy the Wall Street consensus. With his heterodox approach to junk bonds, he pioneered a new asset class known today as high-yield bonds. By staying true to his vision, Mike overturned decades of economic orthodoxy. He bootstrapped entirely new industries by redirecting billions of dollars in capital to non-investment grade companies. His colleagues on Wall Street told him he was delusional and a fool, but ultimately history proved him right. Sound familiar? Like Mike Milken, President Trump has no shortage of critics in establishment circles, but he proved them wrong in his first term, and he is proving them wrong again today. On President Trump's first day in office, he vowed to usher in a new golden age for our country. A golden age America deserves a golden age economy. So for the past 100 days, we've been preparing the soil. We have uprooted government waste and harmful regulations. We have planted the seeds of private investment, and we have fertilized the ground with fresh tax legislation. Next, we harvest, and we want you to harvest with us. America is the Schelling point of global finance. We have the world's reserve currency and the deepest and most liquid capital markets and the strongest property rights. For these reasons, the United States is the premier destination for international capital, and the administration's goal is to make it even more appealing for investors like you. This morning, I will explain how we plan to achieve that goal. The primary components of the Trump economic agenda, trade, tax cuts, and deregulation, are not standalone policies. They are interlocking parts of an engine designed to drive long-term investment in the American economy. Our goal with trade policy is to level the playing field for our great American workers and companies. With a level playing field, American industry can outcompete all challengers. Tariffs are engineered to encourage companies like yours to invest directly in the United States. Hire your workers here. Build your factories here. Make your products here. You'll be glad you did, not only because we have the most productive workforce in the world, but because we will soon have the most favorable tax and regulatory environment as well. This is where tax incentives and deregulation come into play. You may have heard one big, beautiful bill floating around Congress. This bill is big and beautiful for Main Street America and investors alike. The president's signature tax legislation will prevent an enormous tax hike on Main Street by making the small business deduction permanent. It will also provide tax credits and deductions for research and innovation to stimulate investment in high-tech operations. It will restore 100% expensing for equipment while expanding that incentive to new factory construction. The objective, to accelerate investment in American industry. To make that investment as seamless and rewarding as possible, President Trump has embraced an ambitious deregulation agenda. This includes expansive permitting reform. The president doesn't want to just drill, baby, drill. He wants to build, baby, build. To that end, he has signed executive orders to reduce the federal approval process for new energy and construction projects from several years to just a few months. This simple reform will unleash the creative potential of America's builders. It will empower business leaders like you to put your capital to work as quickly and efficiently as possible. The building renaissance will be fueled by the president's energy dominance agenda. Energy is the base layer of all economic activity. That's why the administration champions an all-of-the-above approach to energy development to drive down the cost of doing business. I hope you can see the bigger picture now. The Trump economic agenda is more than the sum of its parts. Trade, tax cuts, and deregulation may be three distinct policies, but each policy is mutually reinforcing, and acting in concert, they push toward the same goal, to solidify our position as the home of global capital. The result of the president's economic plan will be more jobs, more homes, more growth, more factories, more critical manufacturing plants, more semiconductors, more energy, more opportunity, more defense, more economic security, more innovation. In short, more of all things we need the most. The president believes we can achieve more together. This is the abundant vision he has for the future. He wants everyone to be a part of it. Thousands of businesses are now catching the president's vision. Since he assumed office in January, companies have pledged to invest trillions into the U.S. economy. President Trump has secured more investment for our country in 100 days than President Biden did during all 4 years. Entrepreneurs, too, are starting to understand what the president is trying to accomplish. March saw one of the highest levels ever recorded for new business applications. Many of these men and women, like many of you, are grasping that America First is the blueprint for a more abundant world. For now, a parting thought. When I entered public service, I spent more than 40 years in the asset management business. There, one mantra guides one of the world's most successful investors: never bet against America. Warren Buffett coined the phrase, and it's been his lodestar as long as he's been in the game. Never bet against America captures a time-tested truth. The American economy is unstoppable. Throw whatever you will at our capital markets: the Great Depression, 2 world wars, 9/11, a COVID recession of the last few years, or sky-high inflation. Each time the American economy gets knocked down, it gets back up again. And it gets back up even stronger than it was before. U.S. markets are anti-fragile.
That's why I said when the markets start tanking and we hit that bottom at 4,800, just above 4,810, I said start buying. I didn't say sell. You have these other very famous podcasters on YouTube, right? They were saying, oh, you need to sell. Dollars crashing. Treasuries are crashing. Equities are crashing. It's called dislocation, and it only lasts for 48 hours. And guess what? I was right. They were wrong. And if you listen to me, you would have earned anywhere from 10% to 18% on return. If you listened to them, you would have lost more money because you would have been fearful and sold. Proof is in the pudding. I'm telling you. I told you how to navigate through the crisis in 2020 and what to do to improve your immune system. And I am telling you how to navigate through this little financial hiccup. Don't bet against America. You are going to fail if you bet against America. Okay. What I want to do is plug a couple supplements here. Vitamin C and magnesium and zinc. Really important. Helps to boost up your immune system. Vitamin C also helps to improve your skin. So take vitamin C and magnesium, help with your skin, help with your immune system, and also the magnesium in here will help with your brain function. Or you can get magnesium and zinc, boost up your immune system and help with your brain function. Or better yet, stack them together. You can stack these together and it'll help with your brain function, your skin, and your immune system. It's a powerful stack. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C, magnesium, and the magnesium and zinc. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. You can also get magnesium another way from my store through the Boomer Boost. Taking magnesium supplements will help to improve the efficacy of vitamin D3. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Stack these, very important. Improve your brain function, extremely important these days. We have lots of people getting older. You need to improve your brain function. So please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off. The link is in the description of this video. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Over the years, we've had a number of secretaries of treasury that were not really into financial markets. And so you're the right person at the right time. But it's interesting when I think about it, how do you strike the balance between the administration's goal of reindustrialization in the U.S. and the risk of isolating the U.S. economy?
Well, I think that they're not mutually exclusive. And as I've said many times, that obviously in this trade puzzle, China's the biggest piece. Where do we end up with China? And I said during IMF week in Washington, said, it's possible that we could, as Ray Dalio might say, do a big, beautiful rebalancing. That if we want more manufacturing, everyone agrees except Chinese leadership that they need more consumption. We could actually do that together. And then, look, on the other side, that getting better terms of trade is not always a straight line. It's not always a pleasant process, but I think at the end, the trading relationships will be stronger. Our security and values ties will still be there. I look back and I think about the example of NATO and German fiscal spending. So I lived in London for a long time, ran the Soros office there. And since forever actually, whether it was the French president, the Italian prime minister, people in Brussels were trying to break open the German piggy bank. And President Trump, not in a straight line, not in what anyone would call a diplomatic manner, has gotten NATO countries to step up and meet their spending requirements. I think, these numbers are approximate, but I think only 25%, when he came in 2017, only 25% of NATO countries were meeting their spending requirements. Now I think only 25% aren't. So the Germans, for the first time, are going to allegedly do a big fiscal spend, which will drive European growth. And so can we do the same thing on trade? I think so.
So let's talk maybe about a specific situation. You recently signed an historic economic partnership with Ukraine. And as you said, there was a few bumps along the way. Can you walk us through the role that the Treasury played and what is expected to come out of this agreement?
And let's walk backwards. That I was bemused, gratified to see that on Saturday, as I was coming out here, Friday, as I was coming out here, Washington Post lead headline was Russia now nervous after U.S.-Ukraine signed deal. And that I believe that this would happen in February. President Trump believed that it would happen in February. And this was President Trump's idea. He likes negotiating, as you know. A lot of people in this room probably know. And he likes creating negotiating leverage for himself. And the Ukraine investment partnership, the economic partnership, was his idea. And he believed that it would do several things. One, it would create more leverage for him with the Russian leadership when it was time to go to them. So the idea was start with Ukraine, sign a deal that shows that there is no daylight between the U.S. and the Ukrainian people. It would be a symbol to Ukrainian people that the U.S. is still there. It would be a symbol to a tired American public, skeptical of more financial commitments, that it was possible to have a shared prosperity with Ukraine. And then it would, in essence, be a tacit security guarantee because of the economic partnership. I went to, and just to give you the timeline, so he tasked me with drawing up the document, speaking with Ukrainians. I thought it was a good idea to actually go to Kyiv. For anyone who hasn't been, you fly to Poland, you take a 10-hour night train into Kyiv, and you do that to keep from getting shot down, and which is good. And everyone was saying, "Oh, like this isn't a good deal. This isn't a good deal." And I said, "Well, if it's not a good deal, why did the Russians bomb Kyiv for the first time?" So I went on February 10th. The Russians bombed Kyiv at 4 in the morning for an hour for the first time since November, because they knew the train arrived at 8. And so before I got there, so if the Russians, if we were pro-Russian and this was a terrible deal for Ukrainians, why didn't the Russians want to sign? So then President Zelensky elected not to sign it that day. He elected not to sign it at the Munich Security Conference a few days later. There was a little incident at the White House some of you may have seen. President Trump called it great TV.
All right, so what I want to do is I want to go to Times Radio talking about the White House divided.
To me, it's about getting the day structure right. Looking at like different aspects of nature and how they fit together, and having your personality.
There are some fundamental questions now that will have to be answered in the White House and speak to significant divisions between Donald Trump's advisors as to whether the answer to the Houthi thing is to put pressure on the jugular, as it were, and to attack Iran and hold them accountable. But if you do that, then presumably the whole attempt to get back into the business of restricting their nuclear program will either stall or be completely discarded and thrown out the window.
Mark Urban is here, as he is every Monday, to talk us through the big foreign policy, diplomatic and defence stories. Hello, Mark. Welcome back.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Good to have you with us, and happy bank holiday to you. Look, we've just heard, very recently, that the Israeli Security Cabinet has voted to capture the entire Gaza Strip as tens of thousands of reservists are called up. What does that mean, to capture the entire Gaza Strip, do you think?
Well, simply, it's a complete reoccupation. It's the reversal of what was done in two stages in 1994-5, when they handed over the administration of much of the Strip to the Palestinian Authority. And then in 2005, the Israeli army left, and about 20 settlements there, Jewish settlements, were dismantled, and they cleared out. And the army went with them. Now, given everything that's happened since the 7th of October 2023, it would appear that they've now decided that reoccupation is the only way to ensure their security. The other aspect of this year that's been bubbling away over the last few days is the question of aid distribution. Now, the Israelis have put a chokehold on the Gaza Strip for the last couple of months in terms of not allowing aid in, because they've tried to push through a new system for meeting humanitarian needs of the 2 million or so people in there. Now, they had originally banned what was the old system, the United Nations Refugee and Works Administration, UNRWA so-called. They put forward an alternative system, which I think yesterday or the day before, the UN declined to work with. So I think in part the Israelis will present this as, well, we've got no option. We can't get aid in now.
unless we go in and re-administer the whole place. But of course, you know, like many things in the Middle East, there's a sort of rather complex series of steps that led to that situation.
And look, I mean, in as much as we understand the scale of the conflict so far, you know, and everything we've seen coming out of Gaza, you know, the place looks devastated, and yet Hamas are still there. How much further is this than they've gone already? You see what I mean? How much more war does this mean? Do they effectively occupy Gaza already, or is this a major new step in conflict?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, the Israeli army has done a number of big offensives in there. You know, parts of northern Gaza have been invaded sort of 4 times. And obviously there is very extensive destruction in the north of the Gaza Strip and down on the Egyptian border in the Rafah area. Now, they announced a few weeks ago that they were going to create 3 new security corridors, 2 of which pretty much take in the whole of that southern part, the Rafah part, and would require the absorption of 20% or so of the Gaza Strip. Now, what seems to have been announced today goes much further, but having said everything I've just said, there is still about a third of the Gaza Strip where they've never operated. Now, this includes the so-called Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone on the coastal strip, and a couple of other big towns where they have actually never operated. So there are areas, we see the pictures of devastation, there are areas that have not been destroyed, but if they go for full reoccupation, well, it's an open question, clearly, as to what will happen to those.
Sure. Well, look, sticking in that region, Mark, at the weekend you wrote, or yesterday, in fact, you wrote your column about the Houthis in Yemen and the attacks they were launching on Israel, and as if they were reading, they successfully hit just by the airport in Tel Aviv with a ballistic missile on Sunday morning. What's happened since that attack, and what form are we expecting Israel's response to take?
Well, the Israelis, they have responded to the Houthis on a couple of previous occasions, and generally the trigger has been when an attack has got through that's killed somebody. But in this case, nobody was killed, but the missile, ballistic missile, flying a very long distance from Yemen, landed just outside the airport, the main international airport for Israel, the Tel Aviv International Airport. And that, I think, is a bit of a strategic shocker for the Israelis, despite the fact they've tried to say to the public, look, no system of defense is perfect. And they fired off many missiles, both Israeli and American, at very substantial cost, shooting down these ballistic missiles that the Houthis have fired in since November of 2023. It is an embarrassment, notwithstanding that they've tried to, as I say, prepare the public for the fact that some will get through. Now, I think the big question with this now, and the real kind of inflection point, is what is America going to do? Because America, for the past, 6 weeks or so, has been mounting these intense daily air attacks on the Houthis in an attempt to get them to stop both attacks.
Oh, before you leave, can you turn that document into a PDF for me? Thanks.
At 5:30 on Friday? Actually, to get them to stop both attacks on international shipping and these missile attacks on Israel. And of course, they haven't done so. And that's what I was writing about yesterday for the Sunday Times, is why have the Houthis proven so able to resist this type of military pressure, and now they're going to be under extensive sanctions as well, or have been since January of this year. So they'll have considerable humanitarian pressures as well, with imports and other things being stopped. I think all eyes are now on the US, because the US, both Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary last week, and then Donald Trump in response to this latest attack on Tel Aviv Airport, have basically said we're going to hold Iran responsible, and implied that they're going to attack Iran because of its support and its provision, for example, of those missiles that get fired at Tel Aviv, that they send them to the Houthis. So that's one thing, but at the same time, there's supposed to be a new reinvigorated process going on to try and solve the Iranian nuclear question, and it would appear that Donald Trump is quite keen to get a win there, to get some sort of deal with Iran on that. It's been faltering a bit for the last week or two, that process, but there are some fundamental questions now that will have to be answered in the White House and speak to significant divisions between Donald Trump's advisors as to whether the answer to the Houthi thing is to put pressure on the jugular, as it were, and to attack Iran and hold them accountable. But if you do that, then presumably the whole attempt to get back into the business of restricting their nuclear program will either stall or be completely discarded and thrown out the window. So that's the decision they've got to make. And I sense, given the kind of language that's come from the White House since this latest attack and from the Pentagon before it, that they've kind of boxed themselves in on this.
Yeah, I mean, before we move on from this, Mark, just how are the Houthis proving so resilient? Because I mean, Yemen is hardly a functioning state at the best of times. They're getting pummeled at the moment. How are they still capable of launching attacks like this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, they've withstood so much. You know, there were several years when there was this Saudi-led coalition in Yemen trying to overwhelm them and bring about some kind of solution in Yemen to the Saudis' liking, obviously, which has been successfully resisted. Look, they're tough. They have a substantial base among the Shia population there. They're a political movement as well as a military one. Those people feel they're engaged in a struggle for survival against some of the other groups and some of the other neighbours that would wish to suppress them. And they've had this benefit all the way through of significant material support from Iran. And I mean, the Houthis, you know, they've got so many different ways, for example, of attacking shipping coming through the Red Sea. They've got missiles with a 500-kilometer range. They've got missiles with a 100-kilometer range. They've got ones that are cruise missiles, fly low and fairly slow near the surface of the sea. They've got ballistic ones that dive in on the target. They've got drones. I mean, they have literally got an arsenal which most countries in the world, certainly including most European countries, couldn't match in terms of sort of variety and numbers of weapons. So they are very well armed. They store a lot of this weaponry in caves and built up areas. It's hard, despite everything the Americans have done and cost for themselves, to reduce it. And they never really faced a really significant ground offensive, which is what the Iranians' partners in Lebanon, Hezbollah, got really caught out by in the autumn last year when the Israelis invaded.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark Urban. You can hear him on the show on Mondays, and you can read it in the Sunday Times every week. Always an essential briefing there from Mark.
Hey, it's Tony Robbins. You know, I've had the
but what we're trying to do is to go back to the Trump 1.0 non-inflationary growth. So I think if we can put non-inflationary growth in place and take away, back to your initial question, why am I sitting here, is to take away the credit risk of the U.S. government, then I think rates will naturally come down. And as I've said before, there's an opportunity here that if we can do it, the goal on one side, I call it reprivatizing the government or reprivatizing the U.S. economy. On one side, we want to bring down government borrowing slowly, maybe decrease the deficit by 1% a year. So by the time President Trump leaves office, we're back at the long-term average of about 3.5% deficit to GDP, and the denominator grows faster than the numerator. Debt to GDP goes down. So we're decreasing the government and the economy. At the same time, we are right-sizing government spending and government employment. And then on the other side, through financial deregulation, we're re-leveraging the private sector. And then the excess employment that was shed in the government economy can go to the private sector. One thing, I've never lived in D.C. before, but one thing that really struck me was within a 10-mile radius of D.C., 25% of the nation's economy pulses through there. And that's too much. Traditionally, it's about 21%. And we've got to make sure we have a stewardship obligation to make sure that that is spent wisely.
So we were making a decision where to have the Milken Institute School of Public Health. Besides the fact the executive office building is 1 block away from GW, but every major decision on medical was located within a mile or so. And so the decision ultimately with the talent we had there with Len Goldman and others was we would go to GW because the decisions were being made there. Now, as you know, we spent 12 years building this building across the street from your new home at the Treasury and the Center for the American Dream. And we thought it was a 4-year project. It turned out to be a 12-year project. But this passion for the ideal of American Dream, I believe, is something you truly believe in. We've been asking 10,000 individuals in more than 100 countries around the world that live there or have come here, how they interpret that phrase. What does that mean? What does the American dream that you're going to protect for so many of us, what does it mean to you?
It means a shared vision. We're going to approach the 250th anniversary next year, or we will have the 250th anniversary next year. And it's what does the next 250 look like? And to me, it's the equal opportunity for great outcomes. It's like I said, it's equal opportunity. If you're one of the children of the construction workers in the Duquesne Arena on November 4th, that you might be sitting here because you founded a financial services company, or because you're a medical researcher, or it's the opportunity for people in this room to continue to prosper. But to me, it's two things. It is the fact that the system works and that there is mobility, that we get rid of these discouraging surveys of families and children who don't think they're going to do as well as their parents. So we need a belief in the system, and we need to continue making sure that the system works. So to me, that's the American dream.
Well, you wrapped that up in a bow for us here on that. What we have found in every survey for 12 years is the number one essential ingredient condition that exists for the American dream was freedom to live your life, whether you want to be a steel worker or whether you want to work in finance or wherever you wanted to pursue, or whether you want to be the soccer coach of your daughter's soccer team. So, Mr. Secretary, we couldn't be happier that you took up the mantle of public service, and we look forward to your stewardship for the next few years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent at the Milken Institute, being interviewed by Mr. Milken himself. Just to update you on a couple of these headlines here, Scott Bessent saying that he is not going to talk about the Fed, but it's important to focus on the 10-year, has a lot of components, and he's trying to create the best environment for stable rates, and saying that really want to get back to that Trump 1.0 non-inflationary growth. All right, let's get an update on markets and stocks that we're watching here. For that, we go to John Tucker. John?
And right now, the major indexes, they are lower, Alex. S&P 500 down, ending its longest advance in about 20 years. Trade uncertainty still weighing on sentiment. So the S&P 500 still down about 7.8% from its peak. Robert Teeter at Silvercrest Asset Management says, you know what, investors looking for clarity, they're going to need patience.
For now, we're in day-to-day mode of, is the situation getting a little better, a little worse? But as we get through the end of the quarter, we think we'll have some announcements and the groundwork will be set a little better.
The S&P 500, 28 points lower, down 0.5%, 56.58 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, 14 points lower, and the Nasdaq 100 down 110 points. That's a decline of about 0.5%. Oil slipping as OPEC agreed to bumper output increases. Worst performing industry group in the S&P 500 right now. Energy, as a result, NYMEX crude falling below $60 a barrel. And shares of Berkshire Hathaway, the Class B shares, they were down 4.3%. Investors asking if the Warren Buffett premium will vanish as Buffett steps down. Finally, this was from the Journal this morning. Brides are buckling under the uncertainty of tariffs. These are threatening to push costs to new heights. As wedding season kicks off, they're panic buying candles, speed ordering wedding dresses, and downgrading from roses to carnations, cutting back on party favors, ditching also the professional videographer for a guy with a smartphone. Correct.
Wow. I like when he looks at me when he says this. Like, I didn't do that for my.
All right, I'm going to go to Fox News. They just published something about Gaza. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do and also help to support your health. If you follow the way I tell you to stack these, you're going to improve your health and target multiple systems. These are supplements that I take every day. So let's talk about how to improve your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Turmeric will soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. That's important for your immune system and for your cardiovascular system. By soaking up the free radicals, you're reducing the chances of oxidized LDL and reducing inflammation. Also helps your cardiovascular system by reducing the chances of building up plaque. Ashwagandha root will bring down cortisol levels and help to control your blood glucose levels. That will bring down inflammation, help with your vascular health and your immune system. And lignans, which is a powder you should be taking every day, mix it with soft foods or with just filtered water. Lignans will help bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and help with your endocrine system. When you stack these together, you're bringing down inflammation synergistically and helping your cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the lignans, the ashwagandha root, and the turmeric. Very powerful to help boost up that immune system and to help with your cardiovascular health. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. If you spend $150 or more, you'll get a free gift until supplies last. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos.
And Israel approving a plan to capture all of Gaza. The Associated Press says the IDF is tapping tens of thousands of reserves in order to do so. Meanwhile, the Jewish state is promising a stern response to yesterday's missile attack from Yemen on the port near Tel Aviv. General Jack Kane is with us now, and we were just talking in the break how there's always something going on in the world. But in this part of the world, Israel continues to fight on multiple fronts. They still have hostages that they're trying to deal with. Capturing Gaza in the midst of all of this with the Houthis attacking their airport, how do you see it, sir?
Yeah, well, what's really taking place here certainly is General Zamir came in on March the 5th, and he presented a new plan to the Prime Minister. Credit the previous chief of the Israeli Defense Forces for killing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2/3, 75% of the Hamas fighters. But there's still several thousand left. And they did that in the past by conducting raids and then moving on to another area where there are Hamas fighters. General Zamir's plan is to take territory and then kill the Hamas or capture them in that territory and depose them from any future ability to have political control of Gaza. That's the end state. They recognize full well if they're not able to do that, it'd be impossible for them to leave Gaza and turn it over to some international force that would be willing to provide security for a new Palestinian-like government. All of that, obviously, is still circumspect and no decisions have been made. But from a military perspective, what is happening here is to finish off Hamas once and for all so they cannot have any political ability to control Gaza in the future.
What did you make of that attack on the airport? I just want to show for everybody here, Israel has an Iron Dome. And we can put it up here on the screen for everybody to see how it works. So obviously you know this very well, which is this is a way to intercept these missiles that are coming through. But one got through and hit the airport.
Yeah, they have 3 systems. The Iron Dome defense is rockets against rockets and missiles, and then the mid-course is David Sling, And that's kind of mid-course missiles, some cruise missiles. And then the most advanced ballistic missiles are defeated by Arrow, and also our THAAD missile system, which the United States has given Israel. Those two systems fail. The Arrow defense system and the THAAD missile system, and this missile was able to penetrate the airport. And then also a similar missile penetrated Tel Aviv in December. So obviously the Israelis are doing an autopsy on this. What happened? Why did they have failure? But remember, we take it for granted that if a missile is flying, we can knock it down, because we've seen that technology time and time again. But there's always misses. And we don't really account for the misses very much unless there's casualties as a result of it.
Right, because it's also been so successful.
But nobody killed.
It has been so successful.
Yeah,
There is a
absolutely.
rendering of a possible Golden Dome system here in the United States that we can show for everybody. This would be kind of a similar concept, if you can pull that up and everybody can see. This would be the idea of, some sort of protection. Do you like this idea?
Well, first of all, it's desirable to have a new concept to deal with where technology is going. We can deal with point defenses, what essentially Israel is dealing with there. In other words, defend Washington, D.C., which we're currently doing, defending the West Coast against the North Korean missile attack, ballistic missile attack, which we're currently doing. We can do more of that on the ground in the United States. Not cheap, obviously. But the real threat is coming from hypersonic glide missiles. In the summer of 21, China launched what's called, apologize for the term, fractional orbital bombardment system, a hypersonic missile that was launched off the coast of China, circumnavigated the globe in the southern hemisphere and came back to China. While we knew it launched, we could not track any of it. So being we can't track it, we can't kill it. And advanced cruise missiles are getting to the point where their range is increasing, and likely they may have the capability to do much the same. So given that technology, how do we defend against that? The answer is in space. The point defense system that I just described prior cannot do that. So you need sensors in space, you need interceptors in space. That means weapons on satellites to do all of that. And you need a lot of them because you're dealing with the globe. You're not just dealing with IBM missile coming from Russia or China in the northern hemisphere. These things can circumnavigate the globe. And when they get back into the Earth's orbit, they're moving at 5 times the speed of sound, which is very difficult to defeat even in the Earth's orbit. So desirable, the big question mark, is it feasible? We've got to do the research and analysis to make certain of that before we pour a lot of money at it. Listen, this is a presidential priority, and it has worthiness and desirability. But we got to be careful how far we go before we dump a lot of money on it. We're already going to put $25 billion on it to get us started in this. It could cost hundreds, but we got to make certain that it is feasible. And I think the administration obviously is aware of that. Secretary Hegseth and the Defense Department is aware of that. I talked to officials about this last week on this very subject. So yes, this is a desirable program. It's in concept and theory phase in terms of its fulfillment, and we've got to do the research and development to make sure that it's feasible.
Such wise thoughts, and thank you for joining us on a Monday, General Jack Keane. Thank you.
Yeah, great talk.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Structural Nano Silver toothpaste. This toothpaste will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help with your gum line health, reduce inflammation at the gum line, and with good oral hygiene, you're helping your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. So please go to my store, get the best toothpaste that you can buy, get a few tubes of this. It has no fluoride. You know why? Because fluoride makes you stupid. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get a few tubes of this toothpaste. Use discount 5, get $5 off. Click the link that's in the description and get to the website and purchase the products. Also get the collagen. Collagen is a dual purpose product. It's a powder. You take a full scooper every day, mix it with soft foods like I do, or you can mix it with just filtered water or a smoothie. Some people mix it with milk. Some people even put it in coffee. But the whole point here is that it has the very extensive, typical amino acid profile.
do some resistance training. It's going to help with your bones, your bone health. It'll help with your joint health and your cartilage, your skin, your hair, and your nails. It's a dual purpose product. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the collagen every day. It's a very high quality product. And again, use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Please go to my store, help support your health and help support my work. It's a win-win situation. Okay, now with that, let's go and talk about the movie industry with Trump's 100% tariff on movies produced outside the United States.
At Zippy Shell, we make moving and storage simple. Whether you're moving and plan to do it yourself.
The president also announced a new tariff this weekend. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and this is an interesting one. The president saying that he will now put 100% tariff on movies that, as he puts it, are coming into our country that are produced in foreign lands. He says, we want movies made in America again. It's not precisely clear whether this includes all foreign language movies that are shown, for instance, in art house cinemas, whether it includes foreign productions on streaming services, or whether it includes all movies that include some aspect of production that are outside of the United States. Because movies, a lot like cars, include various components that are produced in different countries. In a lot of cases, you know, if a movie is scripted in the U.S., cast in the U.S., it might be shot outside of the U.S., in part because a number of other countries include some tax incentives for production of motion pictures. And so the president here is identifying a real issue. You know, talk to anyone in Los Angeles, they do say that a lot of the jobs associated with the motion picture industry have dried up, in part because it's cost prohibitive to shoot movies in California. The president here clearly trying to remedy this issue as part of this broader effort to move production of all kinds of goods and services back to the United States. The president says he does think that new trade deals could be announced this week as part of his effort to reorient global trade. Wolf.
All right, Kevin Liptak over at the White House. Thanks very much. And Colin, this is personal for me, because when I was in Mission Impossible Fallout, the film, they flew me to London for my scene, to film my scene in London. So if Trump gets his way, you couldn't do that anymore. You got to film everything in the United States.
Right, which a lot of people in Hollywood and elsewhere would applaud, right? Not going overseas and having that money be here in the United States, which is what he's doing. But as Kevin pointed out, there's a lot of practical issues with this that would need to be worked out. But interesting. Only you can say that, Wolf, right? I was in Mission Impossible on a flight to London.
There are a few other actors in Mission Impossible. They all flew to London.
That's right. That's pretty cool.
I was in James Bond's Skyfall, too.
I know. How many movies have you been in?
A lot.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go, folks.
Movie World reacting to a new announcement by the US president ordering a 100% tariff on foreign films shown in the United States. In a post on Truth Social, Donald Trump said Hollywood is being devastated by productions filmed outside the US and is likening that to a national security threat.
Other nations, a lot of them, have stolen our movie industry, and I think if they're not willing to make a movie inside the United States, then we should have a tariff when movies should come in. And not only that, governments are actually giving big money. I mean, they're supporting them financially. So that's sort of a threat to our country in a sense.
Eric Gardner is a founding partner and correspondent for Pop News. Joins us now after to hear you on one of the podcasts on what is a really good and busy slate. Congratulations on that. Eric, good to have you. First up is a very simple question. Does this proposal even make sense when film production is so global and so sort of intertwined? And films ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, are not goods. I think they fall under the sort of, the pillar of services, right? Which is generally not what tariffs are all about. So explain what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain what's going on. I'm not sure whether Trump himself knows what's going on. I mean, when we're talking about tariffs, you're usually talking about goods that are shipped into the country. And at the point of entry, that's when the taxes are put on. But when you talk about movies, there's no such thing them being shipped into the country. It's intellectual property. They get screened everywhere. So exactly how is the tariff going to be imposed? Is it going to be on movie tickets? Is it going to be on producers paying the fees? That's just one of the problems. There's also the question of what is a movie that's produced overseas? Are we talking about where the funding is coming from? Is it about, where is it shot? What happens if it's shot in the United States, but there's some post-production, some special effects over in Asia? Does that, qualify as a foreign film? So there are all these questions. Right now I'm looking at this executive order, the Truth Social posted it. It's very vague. I think there are a lot of people in Hollywood very confused right now.
It's interesting. I mean, even here in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi, where there have been a lot of, pretty significant films made of late, or at least parts of them shot here. They offer a rebate here, and that's as they do in many parts of the world. And that's one of the things that Trump seems to be going after here, rather than what the California governor has been suggesting is helping out Hollywood by actually offering the sort of tax breaks that you see in places like Abu Dhabi. So there is a way of supporting the business. It just doesn't make sense necessarily as far as you're concerned, and I can't get my head around it by using tariffs. Look, take Netflix as a key example. That stock is taking a hit from what's been an all-time high after this news. Let's bring up the live market number for you. Netflix last year spent more than half of its budget on international production. 70% of its 300 million subscribers are outside the United States. It's stock down about 3.5% or more today. You have to assume that's mostly on this. Look, the markets are off slightly today, a bit of profit sharing going on, but I mean, that's a significant drop for Netflix today. What impact would this tariff have on consumers? How will it change things for the everyday viewer and for an organization like Netflix?
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty unclear right now. I mean, if we're talking just about movies, well, Netflix does most of its, work in television shows. So it's not clear whether or not Netflix is impacted. And if you're, imposing tariffs on movie tickets, maybe that means that Netflix is in a better position. Maybe it means that people, stay home, don't go to the movie theater and just binge watch on Netflix. So until we have details about how this is going to be imposed, it's hard to really game out who's winning and who's losing. But we got to take it seriously. Obviously, Trump is all about tariffs. You're right. There are incentive ways to drive production in the United States. It's definitely a real issue. There used to be a vibrant economy in Hollywood that was based entirely on people producing movies and TV. And these days, a lot of that happens overseas. But, the use of tariffs to rectify that is kind of strange.
All right, with us now is Justin Wolfers, Professor of Economics and Public Policy at the University of Michigan, and Art Hogan, Chief Market Strategist at B. Riley Financial. Professor, I want to start with you with this announcement or statement President Trump made overnight of placing 100% tariffs on foreign-made films. Now, it's unclear if he's talking about literally like foreign films that are in a foreign language, shot and produced overseas and then sold here in the U.S., or if he's talking about the Avengers, shot on a soundstage in London there. Big picture, Professor, what happens if this trade war expands to services and intellectual property?
Yeah, so that's the really big news here. I think actually there's two pieces of news. One, the president has opened a whole new front in the trade war, because the thing about movies is they're a service. And tariffs are normally on goods when stuff crosses into the border. The problem with opening that new front is the US is incredibly vulnerable. We export enormous quantities of services all around the world, much more than we import. And so if anyone were to strike back with retaliatory tariffs, American consulting firms would be worried, medical imaging firms would be worried, computer companies are going to be worried, software engineers are going to be worried, and so on and so forth. That's the first thing. The second thing is, this is Trump taking another step forward into the trade war.
I think a lot of the streaming videos and the
streaming houses that are producing films like Amazon. Amazon has their own production company. Netflix has its own production company. Apple has its own, it looks like it has its own production company. So a lot of these shows, they're starting to turn very woke. So I'm not so sure that, that society really needs these movies to be made. All right. Now, most of these shows that are woke are probably produced in the United States, not foreign. But the point here is that the quality of movies today have gone down. Now, the cost to go to a show, at the theater, it's too expensive, especially to go there every week or every other week. So I just feel like the quality of production is just bad. Some movies are even too over CGI'd, and I don't know. I just feel like movie making has really declined. The quality of the story has declined. Now, of course, you're going to have some movies out there that are really done really well, but just the overall basket of movies per year, I don't think they're very good at all.
Poorly thought through step. It's pretty clear that there was no expert analysis. He declared making movies a national emergency. It turns out that's so that he can trigger the emergency powers, but the Emergency Powers Act says it can't apply to movies. So it's just more incoherence, more uncertainty, and every other industry's got to be worried they're next.
I can think of a few movies that were emergency, but that's an aside right there. Art Hogan, to you, you must have had the last 6 weeks of your life. I can't imagine what it's been like waking up every morning and seeing the new news. When you did see the post from President Trump on the 100% tariffs on films, what's your reaction and the immediate impact in your life work?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think Justin hit it on the head. First and foremost, you're just opening up a new window that's not good. We come into the week hoping that we're going to hear about some trade deals announced, and again, we're just opening a new door to just more bad news. And it's analogous to Trump on Sunday night thinking that perhaps he needs to put a tariff on the International House of Pancakes and then favor Waffle House or something like that. We need to get to a place where the administration delivers some positive news, meaning we've cut a deal with, and then fill in the blank, Canada, Mexico, India, Japan, etc. Because we're running out of time in this 90-day negotiating period, and we're doing more economic damage the longer we wait. So I think we're at a place now where what the market needs to see is something positive, and we just haven't seen that yet.
All righty. Well, I don't think that the tariff on Hollywood means really much. I don't really care. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver gel. This is a dual purpose product. You can get it in two different ways. You can get it in the tube form or in the quick dispenser. Have some at work, have some at home. You never know when you need it. It's a dual purpose product. If you cut yourself, you burn yourself, you have an abrasion, put it on that lesion and it'll help to heal. You can use the structural nano silver gel as a daily skincare. You can use it as an aftershave. And if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your nose, around your eyes, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. Have some available. You never know when you need it. So please go to my store and get the structural nano silver gel. I also have the structural nano silver gel in the anti-aging skincare beginners box and advanced box, where in those boxes, you get the structural nano silver gel for topical treatment of your skin. You get the collagen and the vitamin C with magnesium to help cross-link and build up your dermal layer, especially when you drink filtered water, 64 ounces of filtered water throughout the day. And the advanced box also has the C60 and the resveratrol to help with the basal layer, which produces new skin cells. So it's a great way to help improve your skin by taking a look at those anti-aging skincare boxes that I have. But also, like I said, the structural nano silver gel is a dual purpose product. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video and get the product. I also have structural nanosilver lozenges and drops. We are in the allergy season, all right? And so it's really important to mitigate that allergen, that irritant in your throat right away. You can do that by getting the elderberry zinc lozenges. I have it in a 21 count per bag, very high quality lozenges. Get a few bags for your household and for work. You never know when you need it. And I also have drops, which are smaller. You can get them in 100 count per bag. You can get it in cherry, honey and lemon, and also in blueberry. So please go to my store, get a few bags of the drops and the lozenges. Be prepared for the allergy season. And like I said, if you're around an area that has very poor air quality, you want to take the lozenges when you have those days where the air quality is really poor. All right, and that'll mitigate any irritation that you might have with your throat. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
The transaction is expected to close in the third quarter of this year. Shares of GETTR is now 25% higher. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Amy Morris. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's go back to Balance of Power with David Gura.
Amy, thank you very much. As I mentioned, the President of the United States flying back from West Palm Beach to Washington last night and taking questions from reporters in the back of that plane, talking about a host of subjects, including the economy and trade in specific, giving an update on the conversations he says are taking place between the United States and dozens of other countries. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
At some point in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'm going to be setting the deal. We're negotiating with many countries. But at the end of this, I'll set my own deals. We're meeting with almost all of them, including China. And at the end, I'm setting the deal. You keep asking the same question. When will you agree? It's up to me. It's not up to them.
It is up to him. President Trump there on Air Force One. Laura Davidson joins us now, Deputy Bureau Chief here in Washington, D.C. Laura, give us a sense of where you think things stand at this point from our reporting on this. Again, it's been, we saw the prospects of Howard Lutnick earlier on saying 90 deals in 90 days. We're not at 90 yet. 90 days have elapsed and none has been announced as of yet. Where do things stand?
So where we are is there have been no concrete signs that any of these deals are progressing. They've indicated that India, South Korea, Japan maybe might be at the top of that list. And for even last week, Kevin Hassett said maybe by the end of the week there will be a deal. Now this week they're saying again perhaps a deal, but not committing to it. Recall 2 weeks ago, Trump said they'll have everything done in 3 to 4 weeks. We're now 2 weeks into that time period. Nothing. The other important thing to remember is that anything that comes out is likely to be sort of a symbolic nod to an agreement versus something that's fully hashed out, some sort of, memorandum of understanding or something that says, okay, we're going to keep talking, but here's at least some sort of top line agreement going forward. It's clear the White House is very, very keen to show markets some signs that they're making progress. They just don't have anything on paper yet.
When you look at all of the countries who reportedly are talking with the White House, are they hoping that one of these comes together first before the others? Are they hoping that they become sort of signals or signs to other countries who haven't brokered deals? Yeah, is there any sort of hierarchy, I guess, to the way that they're approaching this?
There is some. I mean, they clearly favored the countries who came first to the table and said, hey, look, we want to make a deal. They those in the front of the queue. They're also looking at, which countries are the most important here. Of course, India, Vietnam, South Korea are all big trading partners. China remains the big exception there of, Trump is really eager to talk to China. The Chinese last week signaled that maybe talks could start, but this is going to be a very long, drawn-out process. They've been in this back and forth posture setting, really not even since April 2nd, since Liberation Day. This goes back even further to the fentanyl tariffs that came on in the early days of Trump's term.
You mentioned China. There was this very long, very newsy interview that Kristen Welker from NBC did on Meet the Press yesterday, in which China came up. What did you hear from that about sort of the president's sense of where those conversations are going? You mentioned there was a bit of positive news as of last week as the White House sees it. Markets were grateful to see that as well. This, of course, is the one that they need to have happen, given how high tariffs are and how kind of much of a quagmire they're in here.
Trump's really of two minds in this. He acknowledged what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been saying for days. The tariff levels as they are now are unsustainable, and that means that trade is essentially shut down between those two countries. He said he'd be willing to take those tariff rates down at some point in the future. But you've also seen Trump really double down on this line that has gotten a lot of traction on. There may not, come Christmas time, may not be $30 on the shelf. It's only going to be $2. He repeated that again over the weekend, and this is really going to be the question of how much pain is Trump willing to withstand if retailers suddenly start not having all the things that consumers are used to. Xi has signaled that the Chinese are willing to withstand this a lot longer. Trump so far has signaled he's going to fold if he's really facing pain for markets or consumers.
I'm going to continue to draw from that interview that NBC News did. A lot of it had to do with the economy. And Kristen Welker asked the president about the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, what he's thinking about, how safe he is in that position, would he consider removing him. Let's take a listen to what the president had to say in response to questions about Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve.
He should lower them, and at some point he will. He'd rather not, because he's not a fan of mine. Not, just doesn't like me because I think he's a total stiff. And it's just one of those things. He should lower them, and I wish the people that are on that board would get him to lower, because we are at a perfect time. It's already late, but he should lower interest rates.
Laura, I'm curious sort of how you process what you heard there. So no direct threat on Jerome Powell's position as the chairman of the Federal Reserve. The president sort of indicated that others on the Fed board might coalesce around him and push back on him. How does this advance the story about Fed independence, the sanctity and safeness of that here during this administration?
At least for now, it seems that Trump is going to let Powell serve out the rest of his term, which ends next May. You're hearing some of the more markets-focused people in his ears, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, among those saying, hey, look, you're really going to disturb markets, freak out investors. Just keep Powell there. You get to pick a new guy here in 12 months anyways. They're going to start searching for the next Fed chair. Just let that play out. But he's still not willing to sort of give up, sort of his complaints and his criticisms of the Fed and of Powell specifically. Almost every day, multiple times a week, we're hearing him go on social media and say that Powell is too weak, Powell is a stiff, Powell, he's going to make his displeasure known, even if he's not going to actually take any action there.
And it's funny, sort of, we talk about Fed independence maybe in the context of could the president or would the president remove the Fed chair, but this has an effect. The degree in which he talks about Fed policy, makes his opinions known. This is different than the way past presidents have approached that relationship between the president and the Fed chair. And I think a lot of people would say it might have an effect just sort of on the notion of independence of the Federal Reserve.
And we'll hear on Wednesday when Powell comes out and does his press conference he's been very critical of tariffs in the past and sort of suggesting that this is, could tip the economy into a recession. We'll see does he pare back his language? Is he a little bit more moderated, or does he, kind of continue to make some of those more sharp comments? Fed chairs are notoriously the best at sort of figuring out how to signal different things with their language, as that's what the markets will be walking for here in 2 days.
I want to get your perspective as we start this week about what's happening on Capitol Hill, reconciliation. We've seen kind of many versions of what the timeline might be for getting a bill done here. Your sense of sort of where that stands and what the forcing mechanisms are going to be for this to move fast or slow going forward?
There are two key fault lines that they have not figured out. One is Medicaid. House Republicans, particularly some factions, want big cuts to Medicaid. The president has said absolutely no way. There was a big meeting last week that they walked out of that unresolved, but they have to come up with that, because either they cut Medicaid, or they can do more tax cuts, or they don't cut Medicaid, fewer tax cuts. That means the president gets fewer of his no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, those campaign pledges. So the factions are still really far apart there. The other fault line, and this is more within Republicans in the House, is on SALT, the state and local tax deduction. You have a small but very vocal group of members from New York and California who want a big increase in that $10,000 deduction cap there. You have other members who this just isn't a political priority for them at all. They have to both run the numbers to make the math work, as well as come up with some political sell they can give to constituents.
A kind of theme over the weekend into this week has been, how is all of this playing among American consumers, among American business owners and executives, and around the world as well? And there's this question of, is American exceptionalism on the wane? Is it dead? Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is in Beverly Hills. He was speaking at the Milken Global Conference. He addressed some of this today. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
America is the showing point of global finance. We have the world's reserve currency and the deepest and most liquid capital markets and the strongest property rights. For these reasons, the United States is the premier destination for international capital, and the administration's goal is is to make it even more appealing for investors like you.
He addressing that group of investors in California, appearing in conversation with Michael Milken, who started this conference, of course. You mentioned Scott Bessent a moment ago. What's the role that he's playing now in the administration? Yes, as advisor to President Trump, but also in communicating or projecting some sense of stability here to markets, both in the U.S. and around the world.
He is the key voice that folks on Wall Street are going to listen to see, kind of read the tea leaves here. There was an interesting just sort of shift in tone from Bessent, even from a month ago, when he made a comment that it was Main Street's moment, Wall Street has time, and now it's Main Street's time to shine. Today, he checked both Main Street and Wall Street, saying, look, that these priorities the administration's priorities can have upside here for both. But he's, like the president, acknowledging that, he's softening the timeline here. Trump is very clear. There's going to be a period of pain. But Bessent is saying, look, if you invest now, we can quickly, sort of rejigger and grow the American economy.
Wrapping up quickly, you're just talking about trade and those talks. What role is he playing in those negotiations? This is a multifaceted economics team of advisors that the president has. What is Scott Bessent's role just in kind of the granular level of negotiating these trade deals?
He is specifically taking on Asia. Howard Lutnick is focusing on Europe. But of course, Treasury Secretary is also involved in the tax talks. He was involved in the Ukraine critical mineral thing. So he has a very, very busy plate.
Lord, great to speak with you. Thank you very much. That's Lord Davison, our Deputy Bureau Chief here in Washington, D.C. as we again draw from that conference that's taking place in Beverly Hills, California over these next few days. Bloomberg providing comprehensive coverage of all the panels that are taking place. There are interviews on the sidelines as well. And I should say, Scott Bessent having a conversation there with Michael Milken, who founded that global conference many years ago. Again, talking a lot about trade, the trade deals that are being brokered, the White House's position in those deals, and trying to offer some assurance to the many investors who are gathered there at Beverly Hilton in Beverly Hills.
All right, we're going to go to Fox Business about China. But before we do that, let me talk about the deodorants that I have on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. These deodorants are dual purpose. They help to detoxify your body, and you use it as a deodorant. It's for males and females. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, all natural, no baking soda, no aluminum. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and in citrus. Get a few bars for your household, help support my work, and help support your health. By using this deodorant, you're going to be detoxifying daily your body. Detoxifying your body on a daily basis is extremely important for your overall health, for your endocrine system, and for your immune system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get these deodorants. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. If you spend $150 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And lastly, the first pillar of my core protocol is Max 14, Max 35 or cleanse to boost up your immune system. C60 to soak up free radicals. That's the second pillar. The third pillar is to take the turmeric, the ashwagandha and the lignans to boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. And Boomer Boost is the fourth pillar to rev up your energy levels and your metabolism. Now let's talk about the first part of the pillar. Max 14 is 14 parts per million. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. And cleanse is 30 parts per million. You use it the same way. Take a teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20-30 seconds, and then swallow. You're improving your oral cavity, the health of your oral cavity. You're helping the epithelial lining and protecting the mucosal barrier in your oral cavity and your oral pharynx. That way you're helping boost your immune system. It's really important. You should be doing it every day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two, do it the same thing, swish it in your mouth, gargle, then swallow, and do that until you start feeling better, and then you go back to your maintenance dose. You should be doing it every day. I've been taking Max 35 for 5 years, every day. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. Click the link in the description. That'll take you to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Do you know what's really fun? Make your website on with. Hey, we're how ridiculous. 3 childhood friends.
Steve Forbes joins me now. it wasn't so much rhetoric. I mean, he was describing what is happening in China. And of course, China, you never trust the statistics coming out of a communist country like China. They're always lying about their stats, but are they really hurting as bad? And won't that force them to the negotiating table?
Well, I think right now they're probably trying to figure out this is what you pay diplomats for, to find a face-saving way to get the ball rolling. So I'm sure there's things from behind the scenes that haven't been revealed yet. And in terms of China itself, it's not just the short term. What are lessons they're going to take in the future, especially on the military side? The military is not very happy with Xi Jinping, so who knows what's going to happen there. So a lot of uncertainties, but the sooner we get this done, because there are literally tens of thousands of small businesses in this country that depend on parts or imports from China. So the faster we get this done, the better. And I'm waiting, as everyone is, get some of these trade deals done on the table so people can see real progress is actually being made.
Well, one of the things that I think is scaring China right now is when the EU commissioner was in town a week ago, and he was saying if China tries to dump the stuff that was meant to go to the U.S. on us, we're going to apply the same kind of tariffs that the U.S. has now applied to China, which would mean they would be totally destroyed because they can't, the two largest trading partners they have is the EU, the collective EU, and the United States. Without them, they're sunk.
Well, yes, and this will finally, I think, have a real battle in China. You're going to have the hardliners saying, yeah, we must be autarkic again like we were in Mao's times, can't trust the rest of the world. But I think you have some reformers probably lurking there and saying we need to develop our internal economy so we're not so dependent on the exports and the property market, which is only now finally maybe reaching bottom, that bubble. Yeah. So maybe reforms come in the future. But in the meantime, we hope they don't try to deflect attention on the disaster by doing something like seizing one of the islands around Taiwan.
Right. Now let's bring it back home. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent defended Trump's economic approach in a new Wall Street Journal op-ed. He said, quote, in the first 100 days of his presidency, we've laid the groundwork to rebalance global trade, restore America's industrial base. The American people should expect to hear the engine humming during the second half of 2025 with all pistons moving. We're going to see more jobs, more manufacturing, more growth, a more robust national defense, higher wages, lower taxes, less burdensome regulation, cheaper energy, less national debt, and less dependence on China, all while maintaining a strong dollar. Steve, I love that he ended with a strong dollar, don't you?
Yes, because there are elements in that administration to think, as it happened in the Bush 43 administration, that a cheap dollar is a way to get instant trade and will boost up the economy. All it does lead to disasters like we had in 2008 and 2009, inflation. So I hope the rest of the team inside the White House and Treasury Department are listening, and also the Federal Reserve listening, because the Federal Reserve is sat by while the dollar has lost value, and they're meeting, as you mentioned, tomorrow and Wednesday. Are they going to finally realize that their main task is a stable dollar, not trying to manipulate the economy? It didn't work for the Soviet Union. It doesn't work here.
And it helps Americans. Average Americans want to make sure that the dollar they earn today is going to be able to buy them just as much tomorrow or a year from tomorrow as it does now.
And so they have flawed models at the Fed, like prosperity causes inflation. Well, an interest rate they should cut tomorrow, but won't, is the interest they pay on bank reserves.
Yes.
Right now it's 4.4%, so banks have that money parked there, doing nothing but earning free interest, easy interest. So cut the rate, cut that by 100 basis points and make it clear you want lending big again.
The great Steve Forbes. Steve, thank you so much for being here.
Have you seen this guy? You know, the one that keeps telling us to
Stop running on the trip.
All righty. Let's go to Bloomberg. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. This is something that I've been taking for decades. Resveratrol helps to soak up free radicals. That's going to reduce stress on your cell and help with your mitochondria. Your energy levels will improve because your mitochondrial health will improve. Resveratrol is really important for youthful gene expression, helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence, and resveratrol couples and stacks really well with NAD+, ubiquinol, C60, and clarity factor. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com and take the resveratrol. Really important. It's part of my anti-aging protocol for decades. Now, again, you get the max benefits when you stack it. Now let's talk about C60 for a second here. C60, you can get in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. C60 is a molecule, a 60 carbon molecule, looks like a soccer ball or a fullerene, which is a technical term. And the electron shell around that shape of that molecule helps to absorb hundreds, if not 1,000 times more free radicals than vitamin C. So it's very potent. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. It's in a lipid, an oil. C60 has to be in an oil for you to be able to absorb it properly. So C60, you can get it in extra virgin olive oil, MCT coconut oil, or avocado oil. Now you take a teaspoon a day on an empty stomach for best absorption. If you're working out, take it before your workout so you're soaking up the free radicals that you're generating during your workout, and you will notice that you're recovering quicker. C60 is going to soak up those free radicals in your cell, reduce the stress on the cell, so the cell is going to be healthier. Your mitochondria is going to be healthier. You're going to have more ATP, so you're going to have more energy for that cell. And when more cells, when you're soaking up free radicals in more of those cells, then your tissues and your organ systems are going to perform better. That means your immune system is going to be better, your endocrine system is going to be better, even your neurons. Now, with your neurons, what's going to happen is that you're going to have more ATP, healthier mitochondria, and you're going to be able to create more neurotransmitters, so your neurons are firing better, so you're thinking more clearly, you're thinking faster, and you're consolidating memory better. That means that your brain health is better. For your cardiovascular, when free radicals are floating around in your bloodstream and you have inflammation, that causes plaque buildup because free radicals oxidize LDL. So when you have oxidized LDL, you start to build plaque. Well, if you soak up free radicals, you're reducing oxidized LDL. So you're reducing plaque. So taking C60, you get huge benefits. You're slowing down the aging process. You're improving your cardiovascular. You're improving your brain function. You're improving the health of your neurons. You're improving the health of your cells and your tissues and your different organ systems. That means you're going to improve your immune system and your endocrine system. C60 is very potent and it's very important. It's one of the cornerstones of my protocol. Take it every day. I've been taking this since 2016. And what you'll notice is that you'll get a compound benefit month after month after month of taking this. And over the years, you're going to start to notice that your body is healing, your body's performing better. And when you stack it with other supplements like the resveratrol, like the Boomer Boost, like the Max 35, the lignans, the turmerics, the ashwagandhas, you're going to notice that there's a synergistic effect and you're slowing down that aging process. So if you're listening and you want to get healthy, take my advice, stack these products like I'm telling you to, and you're going to be targeting multiple systems. You're going to be slowing down the aging process, and you're going to have more vitality. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I'm in my 50s. I definitely do not look like I'm in my 50s. All right? So, and it's because my protocol works. It's holistic. It's proper supplementation, the proper stacking, proper diet, filter your water, stay away from processed foods, get proper sleep, mindfulness or spirituality is really important, proper exercise, do cardio, do resistance training, balancing exercises, and stretching. All 4 modalities are important. Learn new things. And when you do this in a holistic way with the proper supplementation, you're going to slow down the aging process. And you're just going to have more vitality. And that's important because you're going to move into your geriatric years and you're just going to be healthier. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60.
Mike, we see OPEC plus the cartel boosting production by 411,000 barrels. And this is a cartel that's led by the likes of Saudi Arabia and Russia. And I understand there's an impulse here to punish some other producers, make them sweat, I think is the technical term. How effective are they in doing that by boosting production the way that they have here and look forward to doing in the month ahead?
Well, I'm enjoying that narrative, Dave, because it's a thing I've been predicting for 2 years. It's just they can only hold off the production for so long. Exactly why they're saying they're doing it doesn't matter as much to me as the fact that we have a president who wants lower prices. We have existing trends in their favor. The whole economic situation is turning that way. And by the way, I think President Trump's visiting Saudi Arabia soon. So this is something we've been waiting for 2 years in the oil market. Now it's happening. So it's a question of where it stops. So crude oil around $56 a barrel is a pretty good support area from the average price of 2019. That's what prices always do. They asked about the average cost of production in the U.S. Commodities always go back to their average cost of production. But typically, in the past, since 20 years, you've had to get below those levels, which has been around $40 a barrel. So I think it's going to happen, and OPEC's going to just help make it happen. The thing is, they held off their production for so long, they need money. It's all coming back on board. And the key thing, remember at OPEC, they're diminishing significance of their cartel. Maybe they're less than almost 25% of global production. 20 years ago, they were 40%. It's becoming less important. The U.S. is the largest producer and a net exporter now.
Mike, I want to ask you about the degree to which uncertainty is affecting a number of these producers. So I, of course, acknowledge the fact President Trump heading to the region shortly, but we saw news out of Israel that they're vowing to step up their fighting in Gaza. We could see another incursion there. How much has that, and is that likely to affect prices broadly, that level of instability in the Middle East?
Any type of violence and wars and things and missiles flying in the Middle East are usually a bid for crude oil, but that was really the narrative from 2 years ago when the war started, and it's been diminishing over time, partly because the world's shifted. U.S. doesn't import oil from that area, and when they do, we have a net export surplus going away from the U.S. We have actually a glut of crude oil and grains in this country. We have to export them. If we don't, the prices go down, and that's part of what's happening with the trade war. But when you hear about that kind of, anytime market bids up for kind of missiles flying in the Middle East, unless there's a definitive cut in production or supply, it usually is a short-term bounce and goes back down to the macro. And the macro is, particularly if the U.S. stock market's heading low for a U.S. recession, and all the rest of the world faces tariffs from the U.S. recession from the U.S., as their demand was declining from China, you see that tilt. It's just back to a normal downward cycle. That's the key thing. We haven't really got cheap yet. We're just heading towards that level. Right now, we're about break even.
Mike, lastly here, we got about a minute left. What have we heard from the heads of major U.S. energy companies? What are they watching? What are they paying closest attention to here? Again, we've had a number of interviews with them, spoken on earnings calls as well. If you were sort of to give us a sense of their message overall, what would it be?
Well, I can tell you what they're doing in futures. There's a backwardation of futures. When the further up futures price has been lowered, I think partly because they're selling their production ahead. They're doing a prudent thing that hedge their production, which means they can still bring it on and sell forward. And if prices drop right away, there's so much hedge. Now, most of those producers are usually hoping for higher prices, and they say it, but they realize the problem is they're going lower. And because of rapidly advancing technology, they can bring in more supply, and they have been, most notably the miners, the independents, and bringing it on, particularly in the U.S. and U.S. shale. So this might curtail U.S. shale, but you're probably going to have to get below $50 to really cut off that excess supply of the U.S.
Mike, it's always great to catch up with you. Thank you very much. That's Mike McGlone, Senior Commodity Strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence here, as oil is really in focus, given what we've heard from the president, the prospects of the trip that he is scheduled to take to the Middle East in just a few weeks' time, and of course, what we heard out of Israel about the prospects of there being perhaps a second incursion into Gaza. And we look at oil prices here really hovering around that $60 a barrel level, and a real concern for a lot of U.S. oil producers, given the fact that there is a threshold under which producing oil becomes increasingly difficult.
Now, let me just repeat for the ones that didn't hear me early in the broadcast. Oil is obviously going down, and there's two major international trading price mechanisms, all right? It's the Brent crude mechanism and the WTI mechanism. All right. Now, the Saudis started increasing their production because you had 3 OPEC plus suppliers not following their quota, and they were overproducing. And so the Saudis were losing market share. So the Saudis said enough is enough, and they said they were going to start putting more oil on the market to suppress the price to hurt these three oil producing countries, so they bring down the number of barrels of oil that they're producing. Now, that will translate, that's for Brent. Now that will suppress the WTI market. Now, for WTI, the fundamental is ballpark $60 or $61 a barrel is break even for many shale producers. Okay, when you break shale, you can get liquids. So the shale producers needed to be at about 60 or 61. A more granular number is that depending on the health of the company and the productivity of the well, it's more like 60 is one tier group for break even. There's another tier group that's at 55, and then there's another tier group that's at 50. All right, so the tail end, the ones that have very high costs for production, that they're going to start having stress when it's below 60, which we're WTI is trading at 57, so they're already stressed. The ones that are at break even at 60 or 61. There's the next tier level where 55 is the break even. Well, we're trading just above that, 57, so they're okay. But if it goes below 55, they have a problem. So you're going to see wells being capped in the United States, and then eventually, once they burn off the inventory, then the price will start to go up. But also that they have to burn off that oversupply from the Saudis. So their two supply numbers have to be in line for the oil prices to go up. That's the burn off of the inventory in the United States and the burn off the inventory that's internationally through Brent. There's also that break-even point at 50. All right, and if it goes below 50, a lot of wells are going to be capped. So there's these tiers. Now, behaviorally, we're at the 61% retracement from the all-time high since the crash from 2020. So we're at the 61% retracement. And that coincides with what the trading range was pre-COVID. It's around 52 to about 54, 56. So we're a little bit above that trading range. All right, so you have the 61% retracement and that trading range before the crisis of 2020. And that trading range was the stabilization after shale oil started to produce so much. So my thesis is that because of the 61% retracement, that's a strong support level. And and then the fundamental of it being at 55, and then a lot of oil producers are going to have to cap. Plus the Saudis are in a deficit for their government, and they need oil at, depends on the number you look at. Some people say 93. Others say it has to be at 80. But let's just say 80 in Brent for them to break even for their government. 93 seems awfully high. So Brent is trading, below 60 or maybe at 60, but I haven't looked at whatever, but it's just below or just at 60. So they're $20 or maybe even $33 underwater to support their government. So this can't last forever. Or there's going to have, companies are going to have to stop production, and then eventually the price is going to go up. So this is a time to buy oil and accumulate shares in the ETF market, and then eventually it'll pop. Now the question is, like the individual that was being interviewed on Bloomberg, the guest, he's thinking, well, maybe it'll hit in 40 range. But if it hits in the 40 range, that's seriously a major problem for the Saudis. And that's a serious problem for the oil producers in the United States. And when that does happen, it could, but usually that's when there's recessionary kind of conditions or huge demand shift. See, right now we don't have a demand shift. We have a supply shift. All right, there's more supply. Now the question is, will tariffs destroy demand internationally and in the United States? I don't think so. I think actually it may perturb, but not to the point where there's going to be a major disruption in demand for oil. So I'm still in that feeling here that the trading range should be pre-COVID trading range, in that mid-50 range, even though many oil producers are not making money at that level. So, and then it'll eventually pop back up. So accumulating shares right now seems to be relatively safe, but it could go into below 50 into the high 40s. That could happen, but how much lower? The chances of it going even lower than that diminishes because of these whole price dynamics of these companies losing money every time that they pump a barrel of oil. So are we at the bottom? No. Are we near a bottom? Yes. Somewhere around, there's going to be this trading range at around mid-50s. It's possible to go below 50, but not for very long. So if you can weather the storm, accumulate shares and ETFs that are longing oil, and then just wait it out. And then eventually it's going to pop back up. It's not going to, even if it went down, just wait it out. Dollar cost average and just wait it out. But it can't last for too much because the Saudis are underwater. They need the money for their government. And our oil producers can't make money, many of them, if it's trading for a long time, mid-50s. So it has to go up. So, but the question is how much time? And the big variable is, will there be a demand shift, a decrease in demand because of tariffs? I don't think so, but it could. Now, if that does happen with the increase in supply by the Saudis, then you're talking about $40 in the 40 range, maybe 45 to 40, 43, 42 range for a little while, and then it'll pop back up when the demand comes back online. But again, it's a big variable. We don't know. But I'm watching this very closely, and that right now it's hovering around that 61% retracement. That should be a very strong support level, and that's confirmed by the trading range that was pre-COVID.
Is breaking through and not in a good way for the Trump administration.
Skimp on the Barbie. John Seaton, let me bring you in here, and I wonder if you agree with Jeannie. You have a president who I'm sure would rather be talking about the prospect of those deals coming together, maybe progress being made on Capitol Hill. You could almost sense the displeasure he had having to talk about this once again on Air Force One last night. But it does seem reflective of the fact that this is a moment when Americans do have some real concerns about how these policies are coming into place.
There are concerns, and I don't disagree with my colleague. I think that it's challenging to ask the American people to kind of to sacrifice, whether it's dolls or pencils or whatever else. And I do think that a broader message about why some of these steps are necessary and what it's going to look like down the road is going to be a lot more effective. And quite frankly, I think that this president has proven time and again he's very good at communicating with the American people and kind of getting buy-in. And I think this is an opportunity for him and his administration to talk about how this will impact not just the kind of global order of the economy, how this will affect families in a positive way going forward. And so I'd love to see more of that rhetoric coming from this White House and from this president.
John, I'm glad that you bring that up because something that's been a curiosity to me is why we haven't seen, say, an Oval Office speech, or we haven't had to address the likes of which that we got from Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, just a few minutes ago when he was, yes, addressing investors out in California at this conference, but kind of speaking in broad terms and making the case for the policies that this administration is trying to get in place. Why do you think that we haven't seen a more direct explanation of them from this president of the American people? Is it reflective of the way that he sees the media environment? Does he not think it's necessary? How effective do you think it would be if he were to do that?
Yeah, I think that he's shown his preference really is more informal settings. He obviously takes a lot of questions from the media. He did meet the press yesterday. He often will do gaggles in the White House where he takes media questions. I just think that he'd much rather speak in that kind of more informal, off-the-cuff way, answering questions than in a more kind of staid approach from an Oval Office address. So I think it's how he feels he communicates more effectively, and that's his preference.
Jeannie, I want to turn to you here on sort of the other parts of his economic agenda, principally here taxes, and we've had a lot of conversations, you and I, about sequencing and the way that this administration has approached both of these issues, trade and taxes. Where do you see things going on Capitol Hill when it comes to trying to get the extension of those Trump-era tax cuts? Or what role do you expect Democrats to play here? They can't play an active role here in the actual writing or passage of the bills themselves, but what does opposition look like as this process continues?
You know, I think we're going to see the Democrats sort of sit back and watch. I do think that the Republicans will ultimately get an extension of that 2017 tax cut. But I think one of the big missed stories about this is that for somebody who went out onto the stump throughout that entire election year and talked about lowering taxes, lowering prices, this is not a tax cut. It is a guarantee against a tax increase that is set to occur. So best case scenario, they extend that 2017 tax cut. People are not going to feel much different in that regard. But I do think they get there. I do think the Democrats are going to be holding their fire and watching and making comments like we heard Hakeem Jeffries over the weekend say over and over again. Where are these tax cuts and the lower costs that were promised? You know, in some ways, Donald Trump sounds a bit like Joe Biden. Joe Biden kept talking for a couple of years about people don't see how good the economy is. This is Donald Trump. You're not seeing it. It's excellent. But people know when they go shopping, and they're going to know when they go back to school shopping, Christmas shopping. If these shelves are empty, they're going to blame Donald Trump. They will not go back and blame Joe Biden.
John Seaton, Jeannie laying out the broad contours there of a problem as she sees it for the president. How does the Republican Party get around that? The kind of continuation of the status quo if they get it, but also just sort of matching the rhetoric of things are fine with what people on the ground might be feeling or seeing.
Right, and I think that was a huge challenge, as Jeannie pointed out, from the Biden administration when they were trying to tell people to kind of not believe their own lying eyes. I do think that this administration needs to continue to, press the case as to why these policies long-term are going to be effective, what impact it's going to have on families. But yeah, I do expect that until people see a real change in prices and a real change in their own kind of economic situation, people are going to blame the party in power. It's very, very difficult, no matter how many times you say it, to point the finger at a previous administration. And I do think that the further we get into the Trump administration, more and more people are going to look at this administration as good or bad, the reason why they're in the economic situation that they're in.
So here we are now, 100 plus days into this administration, into this term, and we've seen the administration take claim for some facets of the economy, not take claim for others. We saw that most recently with the jobs numbers that came out last week. This is something else that Kristen Welker asked the president about during that interview. So when does the Biden economy become the Trump economy as he sees it? Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
When does it become the Trump economy?
It partially is right now, and I really mean this. I think the good parts are the Trump economy and the bad parts are the Biden economy, because he's done a terrible job. He did a terrible job on everything. Ultimately, I take responsibility for everything, but I've only just been here for a little more than 3 months.
Jeannie, parse that for me if you would. Again, the president there saying the good parts are the Trump economy, the bad parts are the Biden economy.
Yeah, it's a bit of wishful thinking, or a lot of wishful thinking. The reality
No,
is,
it's as simple as this, Jeannie, the dipshit. It's as simple as this. It was so bad through Biden that it's going to take time to dig out of the hole. That's what he's talking about. So some things that are healing and some things that are, getting better are because of Trump, and we're still trying to fix the problems that the Biden administration caused. It's that simple. Now, you know, but it goes even beyond the Biden administration. The Federal Reserve cut rates too early in 2024. And they failed to do shock therapy when they realized that they screwed up reading the inflation numbers. They should have used shock therapy. They didn't. They were too late to raise rates, and they didn't use shock therapy, and they were too early in cutting rates. And so it was inflationary. So a big part of the problem isn't so much the Biden administration, even though he did a terrible job. It's actually the Federal Reserve. They screwed up. They cut rates when inflation was too high and unemployment was too low.
Week that shows that even though I think people are dissatisfied with their current economic situation, they still prefer President Trump to either a hypothetical Kamala Harris run, or not hypothetical, versus Kamala Harris, as well as the Trump approach versus congressional Democrats. And so I do think that while I would like to see the messaging more reflect the concerns.
All right, breaking news. Rite Aid intends to file second bankruptcy, announces job cuts.
Wrap up here with trade and the trade talks that are continuing between the U.S. and other nations. What are you watching for signs of progress? I imagine you're fielding calls and queries just about sort of what notional success looks like here, and how do you respond to that? Yes, there's a lot of kind of happy talk about conversations happening, prospects of a deal, memorandum of understanding, etc. What is actually going to make a difference here for those who are wondering how much progress is being made?
My expectation is that this thing will go slowly until they go really quick, and I think at that point we will see, one or more deals made with our trading partners. Tariffs isn't something that this president has talked about since well before he was president, so it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that he's very concerned with kind of trade and equities, and I expect that deals will get done. Trade is fundamentally good for both parties, and I think once those deals start to occur, we'll see some improvements in the market, and the Trump kind of agenda will be borne out.
Ginny, I'll put that question in variation to you. Sort of, what are you watching for here? What's going to be a sign of progress? Picking up on what John said there just a moment ago, this notion that trade is inherently good. It's a sign of cooperation and countries working together here. What's going to be an indication to you here that the administration is making progress in these conversations?
Number one is going to be the trade deals. Yesterday, he said there should be trade deals coming this week. Hopefully that is the case, and we see those. Of course, on April 25th, he promised he had already made 200 deals. We haven't seen those yet. But trade deals are number one, and then, of course, watch what happens in Congress, because the tariff is the difficult part of his policy. The better part that people are going to be more excited about is the deregulation, the tax end of things. So if he can put those all together, and again, I point to what Scott Bessent is saying together, that can be a win for the administration, but it's going to be threading a needle, because these are all hard things that he set himself out to achieve.
My thanks to both of you for joining me. We're going to talk to you a little bit later here in the next hour. That's Jeannie Sheehan-Zaino, Senior Democracy Fellow with the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress.
Jeannie gets it wrong 90% of the time. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients in it. This will help target several systems: your heart, your vascular system, your brain function, your metabolism, your energy levels, and your strength and musculature. So it has a very extensive compound profile here that's shown on the screen. Go to my website, read the label. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Now, Boomer Boost is a powder, and you get a big scooper. You take it once a day. You take it for your breakfast or for your lunch. Don't take both. And it replaces your lunch or your breakfast, all right? You're going to lose weight, and you're going to have a steady burn of energy throughout the whole day. There's no spiking of energy. And what's going to happen is that you are going to notice the benefits of this in about 72 hours. You're going to start noticing that your energy levels are more consistent. You're going to be able to concentrate. You're not going to have the brain fog. You're going to sleep better, and you're going to want to work out. Now, like I said, you want to get the max benefits of this. You want to do the 4 modalities of working out: resistance training, cardio, balancing, and stretching exercises. Do that on a regular basis. Now, you take it once a day, mix it with soft foods. That's how I do it. I mix it with hummus, but you can mix it with yogurt or other soft foods like applesauce or whatever. You can mix it with filtered water, a smoothie. Some people mix it with milk. It's up to you, but it replaces your breakfast or your lunch. The cost of this container, I'm sure, is cheaper than how much you're paying for your monthly supply of breakfast or for lunch. So you're going to save money. You're going to lose weight safely, and you're going to have all the energy that you need throughout the day. And again, you're going to have that extra vitality. You're going to want to move around. So take this every day to get healthy and target those systems. Now, it couples well with the barley. Now, I have 2 different types of barley. You can take the barley separately. It's a high density protein, 2 types. You can get the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley. Heirloom barley detoxifies your body, brings down inflammation. So that's important for your immune system. And that's important for your cardiovascular system and also for recovery if you work out. And it soaks up free radicals using superoxide dismutase. Gladiator barley gets all the benefits of the heirloom barley, but it also has an added benefit, and it's going to help build muscle. It's a high density, both of them are high density proteins, and you take them the same way. You get a big scooper, take a half scoop or a full scoop every day, mix it with soft foods, filtered water, milk, or a smoothie. It's up to you. And you take it every day. Now, you can take it separately, but you get the max benefits when you mix it with the Boomer Boost. That's how I do it. And you'll be able to control your A1C levels. That's important for people that have high glucose levels. And you're targeting those other systems, like I said, the heart, the vascular system, your musculature, your brain function, your metabolism. You're detoxifying your body with the barley. You're bringing down inflammation. You're recovering quicker after your workout. You're helping your immune system, and you're soaking up free radicals. So it's a very potent combo to get healthy. So please go to my store, get the barley and get the Boomer Boost, take them together. It's best that you take them together. Now, I've created a box called the Longevity Boost Box, where you get your choice of barley, Gladiator or Heirloom, and you get the Boomer Boost at a discount. You can buy them separately, it's up to you, but I created this way where you can buy it cheaply or cheaper by getting the Longevity Boost Box that's on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, or you can just buy them separately on my store. It's up to you. Use discount 5 and you can save $5. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the barley and get the Boomer Boost. Very important, and you're going to notice the effects within 72 hours.
This is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, Dave Gura in for Joe Matthew and Katie Lyons on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. It's a busy 1 o'clock hour here in Washington and on Wall Street. Let me walk you through it. My colleague Carol Masser, of course, the co-host of Business Week Daily out in California. She is there for the Milken Global Conference. It's scheduled to sit down with some of the biggest names in commercial real estate, including Barry Sternlicht. We're going to get to that panel as soon as it begins, give you a sense of what the conversation is like among some of the biggest investors in this country and around the world about the prospects for real estate going forward here. And a busy afternoon for the President of the United States as well. The President is in the White House teasing an event, a sports announcement in the Oval Office. And we first heard from Axios this morning that has to do with the National Football League. He's expected to be there with the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell. If past is prologue, often there's a Q&A that opens up after announcements like these, a wide-ranging Q&A, and we will bring you some of that as it gets underway, and given all the news the president made over the course of the weekend on Air Force One and on Meet the Press, likely that would touch on the economy as well. We're going to have the governor of the state of New Mexico with me here on set in Washington as well. But I want to start at the White House with my colleague Tyler Kendall, our Washington correspondent here at Bloomberg Television. We just heard from Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary at that Milken Global Conference, Tyler, talking about this notion of American exceptionalism. And I'm curious what stood out to you from his comments, what he had to say to that gathering of investors.
Yeah, hey, David. Well, it appeared that the Treasury Secretary was really trying to push forward what this White House is saying is their three-pronged approach when it comes to the economy, and particularly when it comes to tariffs, taxes, and deregulation. We know that the administration would like to really focus more on that tax part as they push Congress to get through that reconciliation package. But as you're about to hear, he made the case that these three things combined really do make for a good environment when it comes to investing global capital.
America is the showing point of global finance. We have the world's reserve currency and the deepest and most liquid capital markets and the strongest property rights. For these reasons, the United States is the premier destination for international capital, and the administration's goal is to make it even more appealing for investors like you.
Concerns about the international appeal of dollar-based assets really did materialize, as you all know, last month amid the stock market turmoil, amid so much tariff uncertainty. And Bessent actually went on there to say that tariff negotiations often aren't a, quote, pleasant process, but that there is an end game in sight. We know this administration is perhaps suggesting that we could see some movement when it comes to framework agreements as soon as this week. Of course, we aren't expecting those full-fledged deals, which could take months to really hammer out, but perhaps more something like a letter of an intent to outline frameworks of some sort of agreements when it comes to these trading partners. And we are closely watching those countries that the administration says that they are prioritizing, those countries that are geographically close to China, like Japan, South Korea, and India. We know some of the terms perhaps that could be included, including that the U.S. would like to see these countries really boost their imports when it comes to some U.S. products, particularly U.S. LNG and U.S. agricultural products. And David, I will mention two quick updates from today already. Already people familiar are telling Bloomberg News that India is prepared to lower tariffs to zero on a reciprocal basis for steel, autos, and pharmaceuticals. Then we actually heard from Japan's finance minister, who confirmed that the sale of U.S. treasuries will not be involved in any deal. That was one development that we've been tracking.
Tyler, thank you very much. Tyler Kendall at the White House with that update on what was happening, what was being said at the Milken Global Conference, which is to where we return now as Carol Massar, my colleague at Bloomberg TV and Radio, presides over a panel on commercial real estate with Deborah Carafa, the CEO of Ventus, Justin Kennedy of 3650 Capital, Andrew Smith of Bayview Asset Management, David Steinbach of Hines, and Barry Sternland of Starwood Capital. But let's take a listen to what they're discussing there in Beverly Hills, California.
They're no longer here either. So we shouldn't take it for granted where we are. And we have a 37 trillion deficit on its way to 50 trillion. And that's going to require funding from the rest of the world. So don't be so complacent on our position in the world. The British had a pretty good run, so did the Holy Roman Empire. You know, we had 100 years. And honestly, I look back, and I talk about this sometimes, if we don't fix our education system, the destiny of the United States is not good. And I saw this morning Abu Dhabi has introduced AI into schools. We have to actually get with the program. We can't rely on historic innovations that also came from immigrants that run all our great tech countries that we want in the country today. So you got to look in the future, not in the past. And I think we have a lot of challenges. We should win.
You know, there's something, and I promised you guys I wasn't going to start macro, but the one thing that I think is interesting, and forgive me, and I can't remember who said this, but it's Donald Trump being the right question, he's just not the right answer. And Deborah, you're nodding.
Yes, I would point out and agree with a lot of what Barry's saying, but if you think about our global leadership position in biomedical research, for example, we're the envy of the world, there's almost $1 trillion in spend, and whatever the question is, cutting fundamental research that's going to cure Alzheimer's and deal with chronic conditions is essential and has a huge multiplier effect on the economy. So we have to take care not to destroy the advantages that we do have and also create new ones, as Barry's talking about with education.
Our tariffs? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think part of what we're saying in agreeing with that is that there's just a lot of noise
that we don't know how to cut through, that the communication globally on what we're doing is not really there. So I think we all believe that the ultimate goals are ones that get us to the right place, but how many people do we offend along the way? And
bottom line is we need to bring back our manufacturing and our economic clustering to make our country more prosperous for the middle class and also have the economic prowess for a military excursion. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take this stack that's going to help with your bone density and with your cardiovascular health. Take D3. Vitamin D3 is really important. It helps to absorb calcium. It's a cofactor for gene expression, so that's very important for your cells. And it'll help to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis, especially if they're infected. That's the reason why I told you to take vitamin D3 so early on in 2020. Now, vitamin D3 is more effective when you take magnesium in your diet and in your supplementation. Again, you can get the magnesium from my store through the magnesium and zinc, the vitamin C and magnesium, or the Boomer Boost. So take the vitamin D3, also take it with vitamin K2, the MK7 molecule, stack these together, and they will help to absorb calcium. Do resistance training with calcium supplementation. I drink milk, but some people prefer to take just calcium supplementation. And do the resistance training and the vibration exercises, doing calf lifts. And when you do that, you're building more bone density, especially in the legs, into your hip, and the neck of your femur, very important, and your spinal cord, your spine. All right, you want to build that bone density for your vertebrae, and that way you're going to have more bone density over time, and that when you go into your geriatric years, you're going to have less issues with osteoporosis. It's also important to do resistance training and build muscle for your back. Your back muscles are really important. It's an underdeveloped area when people work out. And when you develop properly your back muscles, you're going to have better posture, you're going to have better blood flow, you're going to have better lymphatic flow, and you're going to also help with that bone density in your vertebrae. So it's really important. Back muscles are extremely important, especially when you get older. Now, that's how you improve your bone density. Now, D3 and K2 also help to pull out and reduce the chances of additional calcium depositing around plaque. So you build up plaque in your vascular system, and around that plaque and inside that plaque is calcium, not just oxidized LDL and foam cells, but also calcium. And this helps to pull some of that out and reduce the chances of further plaque buildup and further calcium buildup around that plaque. So taking the D3 and the K2 over long periods of time will help with your vascular system too. Now, take nattokinase with the stack, and that will further help with your cardiovascular. Nattokinase is fibrinolytic. It's going to break up clots. When you have plaque, what will happen is the turbulent flow in your blood vessel gets perturbed and starts to clot. You're increasing your chances of clotting. Well, you need to take nattokinase to break up those clots. In addition, nattokinase helps your lipid profile. It helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. So when you have less LDL, you have less oxidized LDL. That means you have less plaque buildup. So stack these together, nattokinase, D3, and K2, and that will help with your vascular system. And then do resistance training, take magnesium supplementation, take calcium supplements, do those vibration exercises and weight training, and you're going to build better bone density at the same time. So this is a great dual purpose stack. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, let's want to. Let's go to the Hill here about Mike Waltz.
We know that finding high-quality foods you can trust can be challenging. That's why Go Macro is making natural grocery stores
New reporting from the Washington Post indicates that Mike Waltz's departure from President Trump's National Security Council may have been months in the making.
According to the report, Trump's issues with Waltz began in early February when he allegedly met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about military operations against Iran. According to one of the Post's sources, Waltz, quote, wanted to take U.S. policy in a direction Trump wasn't comfortable with because the U.S. hadn't attempted a diplomatic solution. The report says Waltz's fate was later sealed by the inclusion of a journalist in a sensitive Signal chat a month later.
In the meantime, Waltz's departure has allegedly left some White House officials questioning whether a national security advisor is needed. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has assumed the role of acting national security advisor on top of his primary role leading the State Department, and others assumed roles in charge of USAID and also the National Archives. Democratic Senator and Vice Chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee Mark Warner said he's concerned it would be too much for Rubio.
I don't know how anybody would do these two big jobs, and they're frankly very different. One is actually trying to diplomatically work with friends and adversaries around the world. The other, around national security advisor, has really grown into a major job. I don't see how any individual could do both of those. And then you add the other fact, Jake, that he's still overseeing the remnants of what used to be American soft power for 70 years, USAID, and even for Marco Rubio, I think it's too much.
According to Axios, all of Rubio's hats give him a level of power that no U.S. official has held since Henry Kissinger.
Rubio is going to be the next interim president when Trump goes on vacation this summer. He has so many jobs.
He has a lot of jobs, and he seems to be well appreciated by people on the other side of the aisle for some reason. I find that very interesting that he is certainly better liked by Democrats than anyone else in the Trump administration. I frankly find that a little suspicious, and not necessarily from a more Trumpian America First perspective. If the Democrats, who are the enemies of your foreign policy, like the person you put in charge of running it, maybe that should lead to some questions. Questions Trump was correct to ask of Mike Waltz. I find this fascinating and good. Mike Waltz was negotiating with Netanyahu on behalf of greater military confrontation with Iran without Trump's knowledge. That was what the takeaway is for me. Now, I don't know why Mike Waltz ends up getting a promotion instead of just fired as he should have been.
Oh, I know.
So yes, I am outraged that he's not been fired. He has gotten a promotion, but Trump's instinct that this is someone who is working contrary to the America First foreign policy objective was correct.
So Trump doesn't like when people don't listen to him, right? He likes loyalists. We understand that. But what he doesn't like more is creating an enemy in his second term, somebody that can go blabbing around about the inner workings of his cabinet. And so firing Mike Waltz is creating a potential risk for somebody who's trying to build out the second term, which has been rather tumultuous. And I think Trump understands that while he doesn't appreciate what he's done, he's definitely not going to cower to what you describe as mainstream media, who's constantly criticizing his selections. And so this is somebody that he wanted to be in that position. He won't say it's a mistake when interviewed, even by our own News Nation staff. And so that, to me, is concerning, but I understand the bigger picture that he doesn't want to be wrong. Mm-hmm. He will not be wrong, and he definitely won't cower to media.
But I just think and by we, I mean, not we, but the mainstream media is just getting lost in very petty details about a hugely consequential foreign policy decision, whether to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities or have diplomacy with them and try to go a different way. That is a hugely consequential policy decision, way more consequential than anything else going on in the Trump administration or the government right now. I think because I oppose military intervention and because I see what we've done in the Middle East with Iraq and Syria and Libya and Afghanistan, and think all of those things were catastrophic mistakes that we now regret doing, led by hawks in both parties. I have learned from that experience, and so think greater military confrontation with Iran would be a cataclysmically bad idea. Thankfully, there are some in the conservative MAGA movement, many in the conservative MAGA movement, who similarly are against it, including Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson and Thomas Massey and Rand Paul and J.D. Vance, I think, from what...
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining us at our next investor webinar.
And J.D. Vance, I think, from what I can gather of his comments that I see in some of the signal chats I wasn't supposed to see, and that's a good thing. But Mike Waltz was clearly agitating for greater confrontation. Maybe Hegseth is too, and maybe Rubio is too. I don't really know for sure. I don't know exactly where everybody stands, but I know where Trump stands, and I know where J.D. Vance stands, and I hope they figure it out and get personnel in who share that vision. And then otherwise, I don't really care about the details. I don't care if Mark Rubio does 18 different jobs as long as he's not focused on war with Iran. Unfortunately, I think he's one of the more hawkish figures, so then I don't really care about his competence because I think it's competence for a project that will be bad. Well, I think
This is where Robbie gets it wrong. What, Robbie? You're supposed to kick the can down the road and let the theocratic regime get a nuclear weapon? Look at the problems that we're having with Pakistan and India. Can you imagine the problems of the Middle East? MDS stated that if Iran goes nuclear, they're going to buy, that Saudis will buy nuclear weapons. So you're going to have nuclear proliferation in the Middle East? You think that's a good idea, Robbie? See, the problem that we had in the Middle East with our excursions post 9/11 was because we had generals that couldn't win a fucking war. Robbie's wrong. Robbie is absolutely wrong. It needs to be the mission of the United States and the mission of Trump to decapitate literally the Ayatollah and let democracy flourish in Iran. The people, the secular people in Iran want it.
Bigger picture issue is confidence shakeup. So internationally, if the world doesn't know what we're doing on the cusp of Trump about to take his first trip to the Middle East, the same part of the world where you said you disagree with a lot of the decisions made by past presidents.
I mean, don't all of us? Don't we all look back at that and not remember it fondly?
For sure, it could have been handled way better. And I think that, as he's embarking on this trip, trying to, have diplomatic relationships over there, to look at us and say that we're switching roles in this critical time, obviously there was a big...
The reality of the situation, unfortunately, was the neocons and the national security state and the military-industrial complex. They found the Vietnam that they were looking for. 9/11, and you have for over 20 years, a war in the Middle East that was never ending. That's what they wanted in Vietnam, a never-ending fucking war.
Problem, and they're not saying what it was, right? We know the reporting shows there was a big problem. But the bigger issue is that confidence is not going to grow because when you look at all the presidents of the past, so Biden, he had one national security advisor over his 4-year term. Obama had 3 in 2 terms, that's 8 years. And then Clinton and Bush both had 2 in their 8-year terms. This will be Trump's 6th national security advisor, and he's not even deep into his 2nd term. This is ridiculous. And so when I talk about how the world's looking at us, isn't that problematic to you that we're moving on to the 6th one? And the decision falls, heavy is the head that wears the crown. The decision falls on President Trump to be picking the right people. He doesn't want to be criticized for his picks. He jammed everyone through that had to be voted on by the Senate. And so even though Waltz wasn't voted in, this is still a problem with how he's picking and rushing people who are unqualified for roles. And it's going to me, be a bad reflection for the entire administration if this final 6th one is not the last one.
I mean, I'd rather have 6 people that don't want war with Iran than 2 people who do. Now, I think, unfortunately, he's gone through so many because, for whatever reason, in the national...
So there's some breaking news that there's going to be a $33 billion cut in HHS budget.
Security sector, you end up bringing in people who swear they're going to go with America first and then end up doing something different.
And he's the only one with that issue because everyone else had 2 or 3.
Well, no, everyone else, they're all they're all establishment, deep state, foreign policy blob people, and they get a fellow blob member to do their blob politics of needless regime change and escalation all around the globe. And so there's no conflict. Trump has conflict with the person because he actually wants them to do something different and contrary to the interests of the deep state, but time and time again, we don't actually get the right person in that position.
Well, like Caroline Levitt said, boys will be boys. I guess we'll just keep letting boys run out.
Well, it's not they can disagree, they can argue about policy. I think that's better than everyone being on board with a policy that is bad. I care more about what the actual policy is. I don't care if they fight in public or private. I don't care if they call each other meanie heads. I don't care about that.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can purchase. Most people that take CoQ10, you're taking the wrong kind. You want to take ubiquinol, and you can't find anything better than what's on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get this ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is an antioxidant. It's going to soak up free radicals. It's going to help with the health of your mitochondria, so your energies are going to perform better. Your metabolism within your cell will perform better. But not just that, ubiquinol helps to protect neurons. If you're 40 years of age or older, you need to take ubiquinol every day. Drink it with filtered water. NAD Plus is a supplement that will boost up your NAD Plus levels, that will increase your energy and also help to repair your DNA damage. As you get older, you start to accumulate DNA damage in your cells and in your mitochondria. NAD Plus will help to repair that DNA damage, and NAD Plus helps to protect your neurons. Stack it with the ubiquinol for neural protection. You can also stack it with resveratrol, C60, and clarity factor. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the ubiquinol and the NAD Plus. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. All right, let's go to, this is the Gulf of America can produce 2 million barrels of oil per day. This is Fox Business.
Checking the markets, and all the indices are down, but they've recovered a little bit from pre-market. The Dow is down 177, NASDAQ is down 162. Bloomberg reporting that Shell is looking into a possible takeover of BP. That decision reportedly depends on how much BP's stock continues to slide. Shares have fallen nearly 27% over the last 12 months. OPEC, meanwhile, has just agreed to accelerate oil output hikes in June. They are going to increase production by 411,000 barrels a day. Donald Trump has been calling on OPEC to do exactly that, raise output. Now, this, according to a report, the Gulf of America will play a key role in the clean energy transition. While we look to alternative resources, drilling in the Gulf of America could provide an extra 2 million barrels of oil per day. Trump's former energy secretary, Dan Brouillette, joins me now for more on this. You know, it kind of makes Trump's goal of 100,000 barrels per day look small, Dan. I mean, if you can get 2 million, and once again, it's an old report. This is a McKinsey report that came out in 2022 during the Biden administration. Of course, they paid no attention to it. But McKinsey's kind of a green company. They're talking about sustainable energy. For them to come out and say you can get an extra 2 million barrels per day, that made me look.
Yeah, I tell you, it's something to look at, David. No question about that. Good morning. It's great to be with you. Look, I think the McKinsey report is spot on. What we like about the Gulf of America is that it's a very stable production platform. If you think about this in the context of electrons or electricity, in that area, we talk about base load energy. And what you just mentioned is critical for us. America has shifted to shale production, which can ramp up or ramp down production very, very efficiently to meet a demand curve. The Gulf of America, however, provides that steady 2 million barrels per day production day in and day out. And they do it very, very efficiently. Some of the most innovative, some of the most efficient platforms are out in the Gulf of America today.
And while the Biden administration was importing more Venezuelan oil, which is some of the dirtiest stuff around, I was going to use a different word, but they have really refined the techniques in the Gulf of America that the U.S. companies have. It not only getting it in a very clean fashion, but it burns cleaner as well.
On a life cycle basis, it is some of the lowest carbon emissions it has the lowest carbon profile, I should say, of any crude oil produced anywhere in the world.
Now, Dan, meanwhile, Trump has proposed cutting billions in funding these renewable energy projects that the Biden administration was so keen on. It appears that Trump is bringing us back to reality on clean energy transition. Are you on board with all these cuts?
Oh, no question. I think many of the projects, many of the funding efforts that were started in Congress, either through the Inflation Reduction Act or other programs, have a tendency to distort the marketplace. And that's something we really need to be careful of. Companies should be forced to compete on innovation, on technology, on pricing in the marketplace. When government steps in and subsidizes projects or subsidizes products in particular, what happens is companies become a bit lazy and reliant upon that subsidy, and consumers lose as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, the Department of Energy just announced new leadership that's aimed at taking on the challenges of growing energy demand, specifically powering AI, which requires enormous amounts of energy. What kind of changes do you want to see so that we can lead this global AI race?
Well, I think what you're seeing at the Department of Energy is some change in personnel, again, with a continued focus on things like AI, but also resilience. I think as we look around the world, we've seen changing doctrines. We've seen adversarial nations really step up to challenge the United States' dominance in certain areas. It's important that we focus on energy policy, not through a singular lens of climate change, but rather from resilience as well. Energy security does matter, and I think what you're seeing in Secretary Wright and other staffing changes there is to acknowledge that.
Dan, I want to switch gears a little to Doge, and of course Elon Musk, for many reasons, one of which is that his companies were suffering as a result of his high exposure with Doge. He's going to be leaving. Do you think it will be just as powerful as a means of cutting the waste and fraud in government as it was with Elon Musk around?
Oh, I think it will be. Look, Elon did a great job. There's no question about that, but he didn't do it alone. There's a great team all spread out all throughout the government. And I think more importantly, David, the American people now realize and now have seen perhaps for the first time actual tangible evidence of waste and fraud and abuse of their taxpayer dollars. So I think now there's a movement that's begun not only in Washington, but all across the country. And these efforts are going to continue.
Let's hope so. Dan Brugette, thank you so much, Dan. Great to see you.
All right, we're going to go to MSNBC, and Bolton is complaining about Trump. But before we do that, let me talk about two supplements that you should stack together. So vitamin B complex is a complex that you should be taking every day. The first 4 B vitamins helps with the mitochondrial health. So you're going to have more ATP and healthier mitochondria, so your cells are going to have the energy it needs. But also, vitamin B complex helps with the metabolism, and B12 helps with your neurons. So you're protecting your neurons, you're improving your mitochondrial health and your ATP, your energy levels, and your metabolism. So really important to take every day. And Good Night Formula helps you to go into 3 cycles of REM sleep in deep sleep. That's important to detoxify your central nervous system, to consolidate memory, and to be well rested. If you have chronic sleep deprivation, then what will happen is you're building up toxins and potentially early onset of dementia. Really bad for you, right? Plus, chronic sleep deprivation increases your cortisol levels, and that's immunosuppressive. So that's bad for your immune system. So to slow down the aging process, you need good sleep. Take Good Night Formula every night. It has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower to be able to get you into that deep sleep and that 3 cycles of REM sleep, so you'll be well rested, you're detoxifying your body and consolidating memory. Taking these together, you're detoxifying your central nervous system, you're getting well rested, you're consolidating memory, you're revving up your metabolism, you're improving your mitochondrial health, you'll have more energy, and you're improving your neural health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the vitamin B complex, and the Good Night Formula is a great stack. You can take them separately, But like I said, I'm trying to teach you ways to stack these together so you're targeting multiple systems to get the most for your money. So use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. All right, let's go to MSNBC and how Bolton is complaining about Trump.
For a limited time only, shop now at Raymore Flanagan for pre-tariff pricing.
What does it feel like to step into the Athens 2? Kinda like, revolutionary cage technology compresses, then...
And joining us now is former National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration, John Bolton. He is also a former U.S. ambassador to the UN during the Bush administration. Ambassador, thanks for being here. You've called this decision to put Rubio in these dual roles just absolutely bizarre. That's a quote from you. Why? What specific scenarios are you worried about?
Well, I think in the first place, it indicates the chaos inside the Trump administration. I don't think they expected this huge leak of the news that Mike Waltz was about to move on last Thursday. I think that explains why they probably made the decision that morning to offer him the UN ambassador job, and why, obviously not being prepared to name Waltz's successor, came up with this idea of Marco Rubio filling it on an interim basis. The example of Henry Kissinger that the administration has thrown out as precedent is not a good look for the administration. Nixon was in the depths of Watergate, a real constitutional crisis, when he put Kissinger in that role. And it's no offense to Marco Rubio to say that it was an extraordinary situation in Watergate, and Kissinger himself came under criticism for tilting the entire national security decision-making process in his direction when he held both roles. There's too much to do. The world is too complicated to have one person doing the two jobs. I think it's yet another reflection. Trump really still doesn't understand how the U.S. government works or what it takes to support his presidency.
Let's talk about Mike Waltz specifically. President Trump denies that shifting him from NSA to UN ambassador was a punishment for starting that Signal group chat where sensitive info was shared with a journalist accidentally. VP Vance even called this a promotion. As we mentioned, you've held both of these roles at different times, NSA and UN ambassador. Given the Signal chat debacle, should Mike Waltz hold either of these roles?
Well, I think the Senate's going to decide that. His confirmation hearing is going to be something to behold when it's not just Signalgate that he's asked about, but whatever other chat groups he may have set up on Signal. I think that giving him this consolation prize, and don't get me wrong, I love being UN ambassador, but compared to being national security advisor, it's not a promotion. It really is a consolation prize. They were trying to show that this shifting around is just all very ordinary. Of course, 102 days had gone by, so time for a new national security advisor. There's just no explanation other than the administration was caught off guard, and they're doing everything they can as sort of propaganda to try and convince people there's nothing to see here, move along.
Waltz needs at least half the Senate to back him. If it's a tie, J.D. Vance is there to obviously be the tiebreaker. His confirmation hearing dates aren't set just yet, but Senator Mark Warner is predicting that this is going to be a brutal hearing. Illinois Democrat Tammy Duckworth added this.
He's not qualified for the job just by nature of the fact that he participated in this signal chain. In fact, I think everybody on that signal chain needs to be fired because not a single one of them spoke up and said, hey, this is inappropriate.
Ambassador, do you expect to see Republican senators break with their party and block this confirmation?
Well, I think the likelihood of that, based on performance to date, is pretty small. But it's hard to say what will come out in this hearing. And Waltz may live to regret that he actually agreed to go through it. But there's always the possibility of a recess appointment. Back when I was up for that job, you still needed 60 votes to break the filibuster. I had 57, but it wasn't enough. So George W. Bush gave me a recess appointment, and Waltz could get that as well.
I want to get your take on something else we heard from President Trump in his interview with Meet the Press yesterday when he was asked about the notion of invading Greenland.
I don't say I'm gonna do it, but I don't rule out anything. No, not there. We need that. We need Greenland very badly. Greenland is a very small amount of people, which we'll take care of and we'll cherish them and all of that. But we need that for international security.
The very idea of taking Greenland by military force, your reaction to that, is that American?
Well, it's not going to happen. If it did, it would provoke an impeachment crisis almost immediately. Donald Trump very often gets about 10% of something right, and then just makes a mess of the rest of it. Greenland is of enormous security importance to the United States, both because of potential minerals that might be found as the ice and snow melt, and because of the maritime domain around Greenland. And we've recognized that since 1868, when William Seward tried to buy Greenland from Denmark, right after the year before he had successfully bought Alaska from Russia. And I could go through a lot more history in that regard. If we could just stop talking about invading Greenland and get some diplomats from Denmark and Greenland and the U.S. behind closed doors, I think we could resolve this very satisfactorily. In the Cold War, we had as many as 16 military bases on Greenland. We can take care of the situation on our behalf of all NATO members without talking about invasion.
Former Ambassador John Bolton and former National Security Advisor, thank you very much. Appreciate your perspective.
All righty, Bolton. He just keeps on saying the same thing. Oh, Hochul's talking about Trump.
At Harbor Freight, we're committed to ensuring our tools are expertly engineered and built to last. We rigorously test and refine our tools until we're absolutely certain.
Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr. President?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said.
Let's focus in right now on the president's comments on the Constitution and much more. Joining us right now is the Democratic Governor of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul. It's good to have you here, Governor. Thank you so much. Let's start there where Mark and Sarah were talking about the president saying that he does not know if every person on U.S. soil should be afforded due process under the Constitution. What do you make of that after hearing the president?
He basically said that he doesn't have to follow or even understand what the Constitution of the United States requires of every person who takes that oath of office. I took the same oath of office 31 years ago to run for town board. I knew I was supposed to uphold the Constitution. I got to think a president who took the oath of office not once but twice understands that there are limitations, and that is the body of the Constitution. He must follow it. Otherwise, the democracy that we fought for and upheld for 250 years is just going to go down the drain. And we're not going to let that happen. But it was shocking.
Then why is she being dictatorial, enforcing people in New York with congestion pricing? That's a taxation without representation. She's out of control.
Telling you all you need to know about this presidency and this man. He doesn't give a damn about the U.S. Constitution, and that is frightening in itself.
CNN legal analyst and Georgetown Law Center professor Steve Vladeck joins us now. Obviously, a president swears an oath to uphold the Constitution. How do you view his remarks there?
Pretty stunning, Pam. I mean, I think it's really remarkable. Here's a president who has taken this oath twice. And it's not a long oath, it's 35 words, and all it says is, I will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. This seems to be a president who is increasingly disinterested in what that means and what that requires of him, as we're seeing in all of these immigration cases.
And he repeatedly says, look, ask my lawyers, I listen to them, I have very brilliant lawyers. He also said he didn't know if the Fifth Amendment grants both citizens and non-citizens the same right to due process, claiming he was elected on this promise of mass deportations and that the courts are preventing him from doing that. Is the Fifth Amendment up for interpretation?
To a degree, but not like this. I mean, the text of the Fifth Amendment literally says no person, not no citizen. That's a conscious distinction. The Supreme Court for generations has said that the Fifth Amendment protects non-citizens, including undocumented immigrants. Just last month, the Supreme Court unanimously held, in the context of the Alien Enemy Act, that even undocumented immigrants subject to the Alien Enemies Act have a right to at least some process before they're removed. So, there's debate about how much process is due. There's just no debate that some process is due, because otherwise we won't be able to tell the difference between folks who the government claims are gang members and folks who are not.
And I just want to follow up on that, because there are Americans, and we've talked to people on this show who say, well, why do they get due process rights if they come here illegally? And why should they get the same rights as U.S. citizens? Again, just tell us why the Supreme Court over the years has upheld that right for none.
So it's not the same rights. I mean, the due process does vary under the circumstances. An undocumented immigrant does not have the same rights that a natural born citizen does. But at the end of the day, if we weren't going to have any due process, what is to stop the government from pointing at any of us, you or me or anyone else on the street, and saying, oh, well, they're an undocumented immigrant and I can remove them summarily? The whole point of the due process clause is to make sure that before the government's allowed to take these very severe actions, we are confident that the people against whom these actions are being directed are who the government says they are. We've already seen with this administration how serious the risk of error is and why it's so important to have that check.
Right, because as last check, 2 judges, including the Trump-appointed judges, have ordered the administration to send back 2 people deported to El Salvador. President Trump said his lawyers will obviously follow the Supreme Court on his deportation policies. Is that happening right now?
To a degree. I mean, I think we're in this weird state right now where the administration is not openly defying these lower court rules, but it's not trying that hard to comply with them. We're seeing a bit of a shell game, for example, in the case of Abrego Garcia, one of the 2 who was wrongfully removed to El Salvador, where the administration is saying one thing publicly and something else in court. So I think what we're seeing is kind of like in Jurassic Park, the velociraptors testing the fences. The administration is not overtly defying these rulings, but it's trying to see, Pamela, just how much it can get away with before the courts really push back.
I actually think that's a really important point, because I think a lot of people early on were just seizing on it and saying, oh, they're openly defying the Supreme Court. But there's more nuance to it. On that Supreme Court order, Trump says his lawyers had a different interpretation of facilitate and that he respects the Supreme Court. But it struck me during that interview with NBC's Kirsten Walker that he said he had inquired about asking for clarification from the Supreme Court and that the administration might actually do that. Do you see that happening?
Maybe. I mean, I think
clear up a lot of issues here with this.
I mean, it could. The Supreme Court, I think there is some responsibility for this. It was their order in the Abrego Garcia case that used these words, facilitate and effectuate, which are open to interpretation. I think part of the problem is that you have this district judge in Maryland who is trying very hard to get answers to what the administration has asked from President Bukele and the Salvadoran government, what it has not asked. And the administration is playing a bit of a sort of fast and loose dance in that court. Once we get those answers, Pamela, I think we'll be in a better position to figure out, has the administration actually done what it's supposed to do? Has it taken these steps? And what should it have to do going forward before we have more cases like this where folks are wrongfully removed to these foreign countries?
Right, and just follow up on that. And by the way, I don't think we know the status of the second person that the Trump-appointed judge said needed to be brought back. But I'm curious because the Supreme Court has not ruled on the merits of the Alien Enemies Act, right? Okay. Even though it says, that the administration could continue on with the deportations under it. So, I mean, what do you do if then the Supreme Court says, actually, no, you can't use this act, but they've already deported all these people?
So I think there are 2 sets of questions here, and it might be helpful to keep them separate. The first is, going forward, what can the administration do with folks who are still in the U.S.? And that's where things have hit rather a pause button. There are now, I believe, 6 different orders covering 6 different federal district courts saying, no, you can't remove folks under the statute. And Pamela, 2 of those orders say that's categorical because the statute can't even be invoked against Tierra de Aragua. Let's assume that all works out, that the Supreme Court eventually agrees and says no more removals under the statute. We still have 150, 175 men who were already removed under the Alien Enemy Act, where the courts might end up saying that was never lawful in the first place.
Right.
And that's when the fight becomes, what can a federal court do to say, hey, Secretary Rubio, right? Hey, Secretary Noem, you guys actually have to take affirmative steps. We're not talking about, invading El Salvador, but you have to do whatever you can within the bounds of the law stop paying the Salvadoran government, make requests for their release. That's going to be the real fight for the cases of folks who have already been removed.
And if you look at the Abrego Garcia case, the administration right now is saying, well, there's really nothing we can do. And so that would be very interesting if that happens.
And that hasn't been true historically. I mean, I think it's worth reminding folks that before this administration, there had been a long history, not a perfect history, but a long history of administrations of both parties being ordered by courts to bring folks back. And, not always doing it quickly, not always doing it perfectly, but understanding that they had an obligation to do whatever was within their lawful power to do so. It's only now that we're seeing an executive branch dragging its feet. And the question is, what will the courts do if that impasse persists?
Steve Vladeck, thank you for fulfilling my inner legal nerd. I could spend the entire show talking to you about all of these legal issues of the day. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
If your neck looks like this, you need to watch this video.
Alrighty, let's see here. China threat. I want to play National Desk. This was 2 days ago about the China threat.
The secretary was talking about this just the other day. The unfair trade practices that we see from the CCP, the unfair trade practices that take advantage of the American people, take advantage of the American worker. President Trump and Secretary Rubio had said, enough is enough. We're no longer going to have the American worker being taken advantage of. We're going to put the American worker first.
Principal Deputy Spokesperson for the Department of State Tommy Pigott assuring the American people the White House knows what it's doing when it comes to dealing with China and your money. Joining us to discuss, author Gordon Chang. And Gordon, I want to start with a recent op-ed in which you say, for more than 4 decades, China's regime has been implementing predatory and criminal trade practices. For various reasons, the U.S. and other countries have let matters slide. In light of that soundbite that we just heard, I think it really touches on the same sentiment and concern over fairness. So my question to you is, in the long run, do you think all of these trade tariffs will actually pay off for Americans?
I think so, Dee Dee. And the reason is that it's not just China. What we're seeing is President Trump going after tariff and non-tariff barriers in so many of our trade partners. And I think that once he gets done negotiating new trade deals, that there will be a renaissance in American manufacturing, especially if we keep tax rates low and perhaps it enacts some investment tax credits to encourage more manufacturing in the U.S. But this is going to be painful, there's no doubt about it, because we've had injurious trade policies and injurious China policies for decades.
Oh, yeah, long-standing tensions here that we're talking about, specifically on those trade negotiations that you touched on. Some have said that a possible icebreaker could be the drug war. The Trump administration has raised concerns over China's involvement in the fentanyl drug war, specifically at our border. Could this be a starting point for negotiations?
I suppose it could, but I don't think we should be talking to China about fentanyl. Got to remember that Xi Jinping made promises to stop the fentanyl trade to President Obama in 2016, to President Trump in 2018, and to President Biden in 2023. I mean, how many times do we have to come to this table to talk about these things and give China more time to kill more Americans? This is about 70,000 Americans each year die from fentanyl. And this is a Communist Party project because some of these producers are actually state-owned. These criminal gangs operate in China's near-total surveillance state, so the party knows what's going on. Chinese diplomats give cover to the gangs. The gangs launder their proceeds through the Chinese state banking system. China's own TikTok promotes illicit drug use in the U.S. The list goes on and on. I mean, how much more evidence do we need? So I think we should stop talking to China about this and start imposing some real costs for killing Americans.
On that point, if that is not the segue, as some have suggested that it is, we know that Americans are feeling the pain of this financially. We know China is feeling the pain of this financially. What do you think it'll take to break this impasse?
I think it'll take a failure of the Chinese economy or the removal of Xi Jinping. Now, Xi Jinping has been making the case for a half decade that because of his policies, China has surpassed the U.S., which means that he can't be seen to giving in to pressure from the U.S., and he can't be seen to be dependent on products from China. So he could very well take China off the cliff. But if he does decide to talk, this could be a very long period. And in that period, the Chinese economy could fail, because we're seeing signs that the Chinese economy has been contracting. China's in a deflationary spiral. The number that we saw from April for factory activity was disastrous. There are no good storylines in the Chinese economy these days.
The Chinese are extending, as you know, their footprint here in the U.S. There is legislation aimed at targeting what is called a growing danger to our national security. Several lawmakers have called it that, with the Chinese buying land here in America. Is there any way to control this?
Sure, legislation. Demand reciprocity. No American can own a square inch of land in China. So the question is, why do we allow Chinese parties to own land in the U.S. when we know that they're using it for some very dangerous purposes? Espionage, illegal marijuana grows, human trafficking operations based on farmland. We should just use legislation and make sure that Chinese don't own land in our country, farmland and ranch land.
I want to pull up some video, some Hollywood-style movies that the U.S. just released that I know that you have seen, hoping to recruit the Chinese to the CIA. Gordon, when I first looked at this, I actually thought that this was a teaser for films. Do you think this will actually be an effective way to procure Chinese dissidents to the CIA?
I really don't know, but the CIA's records with human assets in China has been nothing short of disastrous. Between 2010 and 2012, the CIA lost about 30 agents. Either many or all of them were executed. So the CIA tradecraft in China has led to, one catastrophic event after another. I'm not betting on a change in direction towards success.
Also, there are encrypted messages at the end of those videos, aren't they? And I just wonder, with all of the controls, the internet controls that are in China, how that would play out. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, that's how they got those 30 persons' assets, because the CIA was using the internet to communicate with them, and the Chinese regime broke it. So, the CIA going back to something that failed before, anything can work, and I hope that it does, of course, but I can't really be that optimistic until we see it actually produce results.
Certainly a fraught relationship between the two nations. So we'll watch and see how this plays out. A fascinating discussion. Gordon Chang, thank you for joining us tonight on the National News Desk. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dee.
All righty.
I look forward to you joining us at our next investor webinar.
Gordon Chang is an author. I think he had a book that was called Fateful Ties, The History of America's Preoccupation with China. I have not read it. It was published in 2015. I don't think he has any other books, at least. Oh, no, he does. Ghosts of Gold Mountain, published in 2019, 2020. The Chinese and the Iron Road. That was in 2019. Okay. I don't know his work. I haven't read it. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take a look at this stack, apply it to your health. Myotrol is very important. Why? To be able to express the genes that you need to be able to build muscle and to maintain muscle. When you get older, your genes methylate and it's just harder for you to gain muscle, all right? It's part of the aging process. Myotrol is gonna help to express those genes. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the process of expressing those genes. Now, Myotrol, you take it every day, and you do resistance training, and you're going to gain muscle. It stacks really well with Gladiator Barley. So if you want to gain that muscle and maintain that muscle, take the Myotrol, but even better yet, take the Myotrol with the Gladiator Barley. Now, if you are an athlete, younger or older, take Myotrol will help you build strength for your sport. But if you're 40 years of age and you're not an athlete, doesn't matter, you should be taking Myotrol also to maintain and build muscle. Clarity factor is really important to help with your brain function. It helps support memory, and it's going to get rid of that brain fog, and it's going to allow you to concentrate on tasks, cognitive tasks. So if you're retired, it's going to help you to concentrate. If you're working, it's going to help you to concentrate at work. If you're in school, it's going to help you to concentrate in school. So no matter what age you are, you can benefit from Clarity Factor. Drink it with filtered water and take it every day, all right? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Clarity Factor. Get rid of that brain fog, get those neurons firing, and with better neural firing, you're going to have that positive neuroplasticity, and that will allow you to think faster and have better memory, and to be able to concentrate. And you'll also notice that when you have better neural connections, you're going to sleep better. So Clarity Factor with Myotrol, you're helping with your brain function, and Myotrol is helping with your building of muscle and maintaining muscle. Very important. If you take these different supplements and stack them in certain ways, you're going to get dual benefits. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Click the link in the description of this video and all my videos to get to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, what's going on here? Peter Ducey, Trump isn't giving an inch. So let's listen to Peter Ducey here.
Medicaid is important because it helps to save lives. Protect our care.
When it comes to ideas for your bath project, you have options within options at Floor & Decor.
All right, the art of the deal is on full display as President Trump says he will not drop his proposed tariffs just to get China to the negotiating table.
It comes as he announces new plans for tariffs on all foreign-made movies.
Senior White House correspondent Peter Ducey joins us with the details. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, and as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, the point of these tariffs really is to try to get the whole world against China and unfair trading practices by the Chinese over the last couple of years. So, as President Trump says that big trade deals with big trade partners could be announced soon, he is not giving an inch to get Beijing talking.
At some point, I'm going to lower them because otherwise you could never do business with them. And they want to do business very much. Look, their economy is really doing badly. Their economy is collapsing.
And then this is new, a Hollywood angle. The president writes, other countries are offering all sorts of incentives to draw our filmmakers and studios away from the United States. Hollywood and many other areas within the United States are being devastated. This is a concerted effort by other nations and therefore a national security threat. It is, in addition to everything else, messaging and propaganda. We want movies made in America. Again, that is why he is proposing a 100% tariff on movies that are made outside the United States. We know the president has got appointed ambassadors to Hollywood, including John Voight and Mel Gibson and Sylvester Stallone. But we also know this year's highest grossing film so far, the Minecraft movie, was shot in the UK and Canada.
Other nations, a lot of them, have stolen our movie industry. And I'm saying, if they're not willing to make a movie inside the United States, then we should have a tariff on movies that come in. And not only that, governments are actually giving big money. I mean, they're supporting them financially. So that's sort of a threat to our country in a sense.
And now we wait to see how studios and theater chains might be impacted ahead of this year's biggest expected grossing film, which comes out in 2 weeks. That is the final installation of the Mission Impossible franchise, which was shot basically everywhere else in the world except the United States. Right, Peter?
But Peter, does he acknowledge that the industry did it to themselves? I mean, with all the ridiculous constraints and the taxes and the regulation?
No, this possible Trump Hollywood rescue plan is basically an acknowledgement that California used to have the best tax incentives, but the rest of the world came in low. It's kind of like with every other industry he's been talking about since Liberation Day. The whole rest of the world figured out ways to just come in lower, do stuff for cheaper, and that is what's happening. But we also know there's a big lead up to this even within the United States. I believe that the stat is that Georgia produces more movies now than California and TV shows than California. And so it's not just a Hollywood thing. There are other places in the United States that make movies, but 100% tariff on stuff that gets made elsewhere is going to make the Oscars very different in a couple of years.
It is true, Peter, because after liberal Hollywood did that, you had Texas, Georgia, as well as Tennessee offer no taxes essentially on these companies to come to their southern states to make the movies. So be interested to see how it's all going to play out. Thanks so much.
And all that we needed was a president to install themselves as the head of the Kennedy Center. He's now surrounded by a lot of lines of DC's art scenes. And so now that's what you get.
Well, Peter, it'd be great if most of the movies that we watch are made here in America. These towns make a lot of money when the industries come in. But how does this really affect most of us? I mean, most of us are not in Hollywood and involved in making movies.
We could audition more. Like when we get done, we have the whole day in front of us.
And say that a big TV show or a movie wants to go and shoot in a town, that brings hundreds of people to the hotels and the restaurants and the shops. And so it's a huge economic boon to the places that get picked to make a movie. And President Trump is saying, just do it here, and you can do it for cheaper, or at least you can sell the movie for cheaper later.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
I mean, they do the floor. Fox does the floor in Ireland.
Really?
With
I've never watched it.
Yeah, but just so it's on, and they choose to go, instead of using the Fox Live, it's more affordable to do it in Ireland.
Well, couldn't they just make it look like scenes in Ireland and just show parts of the movie?
Ireland is just so it's cost effective to go over there.
Well, it might not be now. If they want Americans to watch it, it's going to be 100% terrible.
Well, but if everything's more expensive, how are you going to make it? Like the budget might not be there.
I just don't like special exemptions for Hollywood. If the president has set this stance that we're all in this together, and every industry is being encouraged to make things here, build here, make all your products here, then Hollywood shouldn't be exempt.
Yeah. Charles Payne, you had a great interview with him. He was fired up this morning talking about student loans and about this issue.
He yelled at me.
Here he is explaining the film industry.
I think the subsidies is where we can have, it's same way China subsidized steel, right? To get all of the steel, and at some point they control all of it. We don't have any steel factories, and then they can hike up the prices, and we have zero say. It's one of these things. It's a massive industry, $245 billion. Almost all these countries, New Zealand, Australia, I think Canada, they also sort of subsidize it. And so it's another import item that's up for play. If I had 100% tariff and it costs 20 million, then it would be 40 million. Maybe it'd be advantageous. And New York City was always movies being made here when David Dinkins was mayor. I mean, you can make the city, you remember, I could have walked down a block and it was a bunch of trailers and cameras and lights. You never run into a movie studio that's set now.
Well, part of the reason is ridiculous regulations. You got to have, you have to have the LBGTQ key grips, and the lighting directors got to have had some type of tribulation in their background. I mean, it's ridiculous, the restrictions, the politically correct restrictions on these staff. So they go over to Bosnia, they go over to Egypt to do a Middle Eastern movie, and they'll say, we don't have a problem. We can hire who we want, the best people for the jobs. So Hollywood's got to change their criteria.
Don't you think?
Don't reward that horrible behavior.
Don't you think a lot of that nonsense is dead now? There's been a realignment, and there's alternatives where other states that don't make that as a requirement.
You can't get an Oscar unless you have a diverse class and accrue. You can't get the best lighting. You can't get the best director. You got to diversify. I'm Steve Ducey. I'm Brighteon Channel.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart.
The world is going to hell in a handbasket. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the omega-3. Omega-3 is going to help with your heart health, cardiovascular. Very important. Omega-3 prevents your red blood cells from sticking too much, so it's going to help with preventing overclotting. Very important. Helps to bring down systemic inflammation, so that's going to help with your cardiovascular system and your immune system. And omega-3 helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. So you're reducing the chances of LDL oxidation, which would bring plaque buildup in your vascular system. So if you reduce your LDL and you're reducing that oxidation, then you're reducing the chances of plaque. That's why it's so important to take omega-3. So take it every day, very important. Another dual purpose product is olive leaf extract. This helps your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Olive leaf extract is going to bring down inflammation, so that's going to help with the vascular system and your immune system, just like how omega-3 brings down systemic inflammation. And olive leaf extract will help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. Like I said, less LDL, less oxidized LDL, less plaque buildup. So take olive leaf extract every day, help with your cardiovascular health and your immune system. And it stacks well with omega-3. And digestive enzyme complex, very important. Why? When you get older, your pancreas doesn't perform as well. I don't care how healthy you are. So you need to help your pancreas. So take digestive enzyme complex. It's going to help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. So you'll be able to digest your foods easier, less stress on your pancreas, and you'll be able to absorb your nutrients. If you're an athlete, take the digestive enzyme complex to break up your pre and post-workout fuel. And that way you're reducing the load on your pancreas and you're recovering quicker. Now, digestive enzyme complex also has enzymes in here that will break up glycoproteins. It's proteolytic. And digestive enzyme complex has bromelain, which is fibrinolytic, which will break up clots. This is the reason why I said take digestive enzyme complex during the 2020 crisis, because it broke up glycoproteins and it was fibrinolytic because of bromelain. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Reduce the stress on your pancreas, very important. Take the olive leaf extract to help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system, and omega-3 to help with your vascular system and bring down systemic inflammation, which also helps with your overall immune system. Stacking together, you're helping with your vascular system, your immune system, and your digestive system, and reducing the load on your pancreas. So that way, you have less inflammation and your overall health is going to improve. Less inflammation means slowing down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the omega-3, the olive leaf extract, and the digestive enzyme complex. You can take them separately, but like I said, if you stack these, you get added benefits. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That's the end of my transmission. Been going on for more than 4 hours, but I had a problem with the early part of the transmission and had to shut it down and restart it. Thank you for watching the live stream on Rumble and on YouTube, the simulcast on X Spaces, and also the live streaming on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Please help support my work by going to my store and getting the products. Help with your health. Help support the work that I do. All these videos I do are for free. If you'd like to also donate, you can donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. And you can be a paid member to my Patreon channel to help support my work. Share the links. make sure you subscribe to all my channels. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.